I deny everything but what I have all along admitted. The design on my part to free the slaves.
Are we ending up on the gallows?
Well, that's kind of what we have to talk
I
about.
mean, it's possible.
So that's why we gotta keep growing and get lots and lots of targets, because that's how they get you. When there's only like 100 or 200, we need thousands. So it's gotta be like they gotta really like whack-a-mole like that. So we can like.
Sound like Dead by Daylight.
At least it teaches teamwork. But all right, let's get
It
started.
really does.
All right. So welcome to the John Brown Leftists. We hope we don't end up on the gallows. So I'm just so excited to be here with the group. So this is kind of like a rotating cast because we make this very easy for our co-hosts, because everybody has families, everybody has things to do. So we might see people here one week and then not next week, but then they're back. So that's kind of how we do things, because this is all volunteer, nobody gets paid. So we have to respect each other's time and families. Family is very important. So, all righty then, I'm going to get started with we got so many new guests. Oh my God. So I'm gonna go ladies first for new guests. So we're gonna go with Patricia. Patricia has come and joined us all the way from the chat to become an accomplice. Welcome.
From where?
From the chat.
From the chat.
Yeah, from the chat.
Yeah, I just landed. I just happened upon this reset race and I popped in there and she's sitting there by herself. And I said, I thought this is awesome. And we just started talking. So, and I realized, and it was before actually I stumbled in there, that I just started thinking, this is really not fair. It's beyond fair and something needs to be done. So I guess that's why I found you, because it was time for me to listen to that. Although, I've heard of reparations before, and I'm very for equality for everyone, especially Black people, because of gone through so much for so long. So, and I've been looking for a way to help in general. I kind of retired early recently with a little SSI, and it's like a UBI now. So I'm like, I can putter in my shop and I can do some tech work and I can do something like this. And so that's really exciting to me.
Awesome.
I was like, what can I do to help?
Well, you're here with us now. So this is the first step. I appreciate you. And I think it's just a matter of the more time we spend together, the more all of us will grow and the better we are at reaching out to our communities to try to get them to bridge the gap, right? Like we have to be a bridge to start bringing our people together. So next up, I'm going to do age before beauty. So it's going to be Bantu. Even though he's still really young, he's the second youngest here. So I'm just cracking jokes.
Hello, my name is Bantu Otaku, or you could call me Rara, whatever, suits your flavor. I am 29, Virgo. I make various amounts of content. I love focusing on networking, building bridges, getting people access to means of educating themselves about different books and theories dealing with Black Americans or just African people in general. And besides that, I like making all kinds of content and creating help for a reason. That's about it.
And can you please give people your Twitch? Because you do a lot of educational stuff on your Twitch. And you said that you're over there by yourself, just kind of reading and documenting things. And it's just you.
Yes.
Like people should come visit you.
So my name is Bantu Otaku. Yeah, it's Bantu Otaku on everything. So Like if you type onto Otaku, you're gonna find my name. You're gonna find the link to like my Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, you name it. Or even if you message me on one of my platforms, I will be quick to plug you in. Like I'm low key kind of streaming now, but it's Eric Kabad doing Jill Scott and I'm singing to some visualizers. So like I'm always on the clock until I get back to work or whatever. But just come check out the books. We're reading From Here to Equality now, and I think we're planning on reading How the Irish Became Whiteness, because I'm starting to realize a lot of people are not clear on what is whiteness or how whiteness works. So I'm planning on having like a lot of critical whiteness study books read on stream and whatnot, so people can get access to that information, or at least hear about it and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, I love it. Okay. Well, next up is Scorpio. Scorpio is our young firebrand. Like, oh my God. I love talking to him. He's got so much information in his head, and to be so young, like, y'all better watch out. We got to protect Scorpio.
Don't mess
Well,
with Scorpio.
He's too smart. We got to make sure he's all right. We got to protect Scorpio. Go ahead.
I'm Scorpio. I'm 22 years old. I ain't always the youngest. I'm always the youngest in everything. I've basically put my foot in, so, like, all of a sudden since I became an adult. I do a lot of learning constantly, and I'm here because I just want to see my folks, have like long fulfilling lives. I've been saying that a lot, but like that's really what motivates me to be here, and also to see my friends do good too. But I'll be out here.
Yep. And Scorpio and Bantu have just joined the Reset Race Negro meeting, which is all just conversations with Black folks and guests, but it's mainly gonna be Black folks. And it's gonna be a good time over there. So I'm really glad that they've joined us. And me and Scorpio have also been having conversations just because he knows so much stuff. I need to get it out of his brain into y'all, because it's ridiculous when you really start talking to him. That's why I gotta keep him on topic, because he knows so much. He can just, you bring it up, he can go there. It's amazing. So I appreciate all of you guys being here that have just joined us. Now we're gonna get back to our favorites. So Jeanette, go ahead.
So I am Jeanette Lamonica Hudson, and I am happy to be here.
Thank you, my dear. Go ahead.
So I'm Ida. I'm from Croatia originally via New York City, and now I'm in California. It's been a 30-year journey, but I'm still puzzled by this country, and I'm also happy to be here.
Thank you, Ida. Alrighty, next up, go ahead, Gabriel.
Hey, everybody. My name's Gabriel Piumati. I'm on the show from Chicago, Illinois. I'm a reparationist and a John Brown leftist. You're going to understand what that is as you continue to watch, and I'm just happy to be here.
All hail King Killmonger.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. It is I, Joey D. Killmonger. I'm just here with the John Brown Leftists, about to get it in. AK the fire next time. I am just here to be your gateway drug to James Baldwin. That's it.
I love that.
Nice.
All righty then. I'm going next to Jason.
Hey, Jason, resident East Bay DSA. I think there's Ida is another as well. Other than that, I've been around for a little bit now. I've been on some shows and learned a lot of stuff, especially with the labor show last week, or the building community. And I really enjoy the time I have with you guys. So look forward to more conversations.
We enjoy having you too, especially because we're going to be dragging you in soon for conversations with that labor book, because there's a Reset Race episode that's going to be coming up soon. We just haven't decided what week, but that's going to be your week to be on the Reset Race show.
Cool.
Cool. All righty then. Okay, next up, Mud.
They call me Mud. You can find me on social media, all at Of Lineage. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Clubhouse. That's pretty much it. Let's get to the show.
Alrighty, and I am Sam, aka the Khaleesi. You can find me on Twitter for now at me17trillion, but that may not be for long. But I'm happy to be here with everybody, and let's go. So this actually came to me because of Gabriel. I was like, what do you think we should do for this week? And he was just talking about, he's like, I'm really disturbed and upset by this article that I read. So we were just like, we should just discuss it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the article.
More than 17,000 deaths caused by police have been misclassified since 1980. Deaths involving police have been greatly undercounted in the United States, and African-American people die in such encounters at 3.5 times the rate of whites, according to a new analysis by public health researchers. In an article published Thursday in the medical journal, The Lancet, researchers found that deaths from police violence between 1980 and 2018 were misclassified by 55.5% in the United States Vital Statistics System, which tracks information from death certificates. For most causes of death, the death certificates filled out by a physician is sort of the gold standard, says Chris Murray of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, who is one of the study's authors. But he says that in this area, the certificates seem to fall short. There is a pretty systematic under-recording of police deaths. That realization isn't entirely new. After the 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, news organizations started to keep their own tallies of police-related deaths, which turned out to be higher than the government's numbers. What Murray and his co-authors have done, though, is measure the discrepancy between independent tallies and the government data and project it back in time. We've used those relationships of what fraction get underreported to go back and infer, for example, in the 1980s, what was the likely number of police violence deaths, Murray says. The researchers based their inferences on numbers from 3 open source databases: Fatal Encounters, Mapping Police Violence, and The Guardians That Counted, which they compared with the data from the death certificates. They calculate that the death certificates misclassified the causes of death on more than 17,000 deaths since 1980. If it's legit, it's pretty cool how they can take existing data from a short time frame and work backwards, says Justin Nix, associate professor of criminology at the University of Nebraska. But as a criminologist who studies shootings by police, Nix has a reservation about the underlying data. My concerns with this paper are the same as many that use these crowdsourced databases, he says. He has documented cases where the databases count, for example, domestic violence by off-duty officers as police killings. I'm not saying we don't need to track these.
Stop that. Hold on. Wait. Huh? Can you reread that for me?
My concerns with this paper are the same as many that use these crowdsourced databases, he says. He has documented cases where the databases count, for example, domestic violence by off-duty officers as police killings.
The first time in which, when it comes to data and people defining certain things as such, it occurred with the school shootings years ago when people said that in America there's all these school shootings happening. Well, there were some incidents where school shootings happened. They just basically define a school shooting as like somebody firing something at a school. And basically, so when I saw one of the cases in which somebody just shot themselves in the car, they kind of as a school shooting. Like I I think when people think of school shootings at that time, they was thinking of like, you know, somebody going to school with a firearm and, you know, shooting people in the school, not necessarily just somebody outside, you know, shooting a gun like at a playground. Like they really said that one school was abandoned and a person shot at school because it was abandoned and they kind of as a school shooting. So it's not the first time this has happened with them, you know, saying that, oh, this is what counts as this. And it's like, that's why I tell people you have to look at how they even classify it as such, because you might be getting some misunderstanding because the way they classify it might not be the way that you classify it.
Gabriel.
Yeah. Well, first, I think Justin Nix is kind of an ass because there's nothing kind of cool about any of this. And I'm just not going to, like, I could spend some time screaming, yelling.
Yeah, that word stuck out a little bit to me too as well.
I'm going to, I'll yell at my cat about it later. But I'm just going to say that's very not cool. And it's what's weird about, so I have lots of problems with this article, but we'll stay with Justin for a minute. What he is actually saying is there are other cases where there's misclassification, and they are research methodologies like this one. Now, I'm not saying that that may not be something to be concerned about, but first of all, it's not framed like that. It's framed like they're indicting this research. There are a lot of problems with individuals who do research in America in traditional methodology because they're white supremacists and liars. So, like, I don't read that every time I read a research report through a traditional methodology. Why is this guy allowed to, first of all, say aspects of these 17,000 people's, the cause of their deaths being disappeared is cool, and then get to say, yeah, but sometimes when people do research like this, there are problems with it. Well, there are, you know, everyone does something right or wrong. That's why it's research. You can replicate it if you don't think the data is right or wrong. And I just felt like that was kind of shaky. At the same time, I think Scorpio is absolutely right that, you know, he's doing a deep dive. I would like that kind of analysis in this article, like exactly what kind of misclassification should we be looking for? My broader question is, if there are 17,000 people who have died over the last, you know, generation and a half at the hands of cops, and that was classified in such a way that it went away, I want at the top of this story to know how many Black people that is, because the math never, through this article, which is one of the more thorough articles, but in any of it, and even in the research itself, the math is never clear on what's the number. So they tell you relative to white people, and then they do some other kind of comparative analysis. But what you never get is, of this 17,000, for example, you know, 10,000 are African American. You know, like I want to know how this is breaking down, because I think most of us on this, in this group, suspect that there are patterns beyond just covering for the cops whenever they screw up. My belief is that we're in the midst of, you know, of a race war, that police go out, find Black men and murder them, and sometimes women as well, but that they spend a lot of their time doing that. And I think this kind of information potentially reinforces that. When you go into the research itself, I looked at the report and I did my best to kind of sift through it, but I probably need some support in doing that because I may have overlooked something. I couldn't find that data. That seems pretty basic, and it wasn't there, and that's a little frustrating to me. I probably took up a little more time than I should have, but this is like a super frustrating topic to me. 17, that's a huge number, and there's like the analysis isn't here. This is really light reporting for like a number that should be on the front page of every major newspaper. It should be the lead story. 17,000 people in America were disappeared. The violence that is controlled by the state disappeared 17,000 people with the collusion, at least of coroners, right? If it's miscategorized, that means another arm of the government then took that, you know, someone came in with a gunshot wound from a firearm from a cop, and they said, this is this other thing. And so you have that happening for thousands of people, and we're just like, you know, it's cool how they did this data collection. To me, it's that.
Isn't that how white supremacy works, right? Like, I don't want to go isn't that how white supremacy works, right? Like, see how like you're outraged when you hear this. There's no outrage in that article.
At all.
Scorpio dropped the actual charts, but I think they're going to be hard for people to read.
People didn't understand that the open sources, like the three, and they compare all of them. So it's like, it's not as if it's ignoring anything. Like, they actually point out what are the open sources missing when they classify stuff, and what they're
I'm sorry. I need y'all to see this. Look at the female rate. Look at the male rate. I love you, my sisters, but I need us to start protecting our Black men. We keep talking about stuff, but we're not realizing, like, yes, we go through.
It appears to be the mode operandi. That's what they're choosing to do with the women. And that's a whole nother problem we need to have a conversation about, because cops will say it's a lie. The young people in Chicago have said that there is a crisis that kids, little, we're talking about girls really, have been disappeared in Chicago for years and years. And the police say it's not true, and the media backs it up. I think all over the country, we're just our girls. But point blank, it must be hard to kidnap a young Black man, because instead it's like they got to put a bullet in them. I don't know. I can't speculate why one versus the other, unless it's also trafficking. But yeah, you're right, Sarah.
But all the open sources, like, they can't go back to the 1980s. So that means that most of them, like, go back to the 2000s. So the research study actually acknowledges that. So the 1980s is really just the NVSS, because they can't go back that far. So, and they compare all of them and see, like, how do they capture and where are they missing, and they also give you what we can try to do to have better reporting. I guess the article didn't point that out either.
Scorpio, would you say, in your estimation, is this really a report out of the last, say, 20 years? Or where do you think the real substantial data is in this collection?
The real substantial data, I would say it's probably from a group that probably was collecting all this stuff and keeping track of, the violence from police that's not necessarily from the government.
But like you're saying, the 80s stuff, there's hardly any, like, they probably couldn't collect in as
no, they didn't collect it because they didn't exist at the time.
Right.
The open sources, so they couldn't really collect stuff they wasn't there for, or they wasn't keeping up. Like, what they do is that they look at stories, they collect stories, they look at public information available and everything to try to make clear that this is really the case of what happened here. So that's what the open sources are doing. The government is basically doing something else, like medical examiners that go on the scene and say, oh, they're dead. Like, Eric Gardner, how they were saying he was selling like bootleg or something. And then they said, no, he had a heart attack. And it's like, y'all all tackled him on camera. So that's a literal example of how they, misreport. The open sources would be like, no, Eric Gardner was basically attacked and tackled by police officers, and that led to his death.
Okay. Let me let Ida go, and then Mud, can you go after Ida?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, I just wow, seeing that graph. Whoa. Took the air out of me. I mean, I must admit, I saw this title, while doom scrolling, I saw the title and I was like, well, I'm not surprised. I always assumed that was the case. I never assumed otherwise, but I didn't read it. But now that, we read it, I see Gabriel is, rightfully outraged, and NPR, I feel NPR is one of the most pernicious news sources because it caters to these, white collar professionals and they still think it's national public radio, but it's become, the funding of NPR has dramatically changed over the decades, and now it's all, deep pockets, what is it called, dark money, corporate interests, and they will always use this. This is one of their tactics. Okay, let's tell them a little bit of truth, and then let's muddy the waters. Sorry, no offense intended there, but they muddy the waters by throwing in this sort of relevant but really irrelevant comparison. They just love doing that, and it's really important that people be educated so they can see through this shit. And with our education system, I don't see that happening. So there we are. Media are one of our biggest enemies. And NPR is on top of that list for me for this precise reason.
Mud, you're up, sir. And anybody who'd like to go after Mud, just go ahead and raise your hand. We'll just go from there.
Yeah, I think I had my biggest issue was like, all right, so it sounds like this Nix fellow is trying to discredit the study, and like it would be one thing if he pointed out that there was like some grand mistake being made by the research, but saying that it's including domestic violence murders by police, it seems like the issue that he's making here is that we have to only look at this in terms of, I guess, murders that happened on duty versus off duty with the cops. And I get that to a certain degree, but at the same time, it's like, that really doesn't make much of a difference to me in the grand scheme of things. Like, I think that maybe all of this should be collected, and like, whether they're on duty or off duty, they should be held accountable to higher level of, I guess, standards than the average citizen. Like, they shouldn't be able to just murder people and, like, I don't know, hide what happened. But even if he's saying the methodology is incorrect, I doubt that is a high percentage of those cases anyways. So still, the number is way off. But I'll leave it there.
Alrighty then, let's go ahead and go to Bantu, please.
To back up what Mud was saying, I also agree, because like, to me, it seemed like a lot of towards the end of the article is like said only to cast doubt and not to like give either a proper critique or to give you like a developing perspective of the researchers and what they're doing. Nah,
because we gonna finish reading it. We gonna finish reading.
I know we gonna finish.
Wait till we get to that part so people have it fresh in their mind for the analysis, because it's really, it helps people, because we want to really lead people along. So, because if you say something that's really good for them, I want them to be able to just rewind right before that, because we can be I'm a little.
I ain't gonna say that. Well, I'm gonna say this one then.
I'm here
all
for
right,
it.
the back of what Mud was saying. Yeah, when you talking about cops off the clock and whatnot, like, we can easily think about the Amber Guyver situation where like she was literally off. I'm pretty sure she was off the clock when it happened. Like, it wasn't like she was working at the time. So when people talk about things that would be considered like, like not like domestic violence or things that would be considered a traditional police killing, we also have to take that in consideration. So like, I agree. Like, we should look into even things that are, even domestic violence, because it could be other Black women or even Black men that is being weaponized against the police state when these people are home or, carrying on about their lives. That's it.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Scorpio, can you flesh out a little bit more of what you're saying in the chat? Because I just want to make sure that it's clear, so we're not. You understand what I'm saying?
So the study basically examines all the sources. Like, there's more open sources than 3, but what they do is they excluded some of them because they don't fit certain criteria. So the whole point of the study is just to show like how other sources collect data and how they try to like preserve like what actually happened, because as you see from the article saying that a lot went unreported, it's because what these open sources are doing is that they're collecting information and they're making people know that this happened while the government isn't showing that. So like the study basically examines how all the sources collect information, what they might have missed out, what got left out due to certain circumstances. So the person in the article is like bringing up a complaint that doesn't seemingly make sense to me, because the study literally examines all the open sources anyway, and they're trying to basically point out that they looked at the stories and see what details were missed, see how they reported stuff, see their own classifications. So it's like every source might have a different methodology. They're not all the same. So they're not making clear about what are you talking about. What open source are you talking about anyway? There's a lot of questions.
Alrighty, I'm gonna go to Jeanette. Thank you so much for that, Scorpio.
The thing that caught my eye about the section where he talks about his concerns with counting domestic violence of off-duty officers and counting them as police killings is that something that is not addressed and swept under the rug is the violent culture of police in general. They're not just terrorizing the citizenry, they're terrorizing their families. And it's a culture. They sweep the violence of the officers under the rug. They whether it's, you know, oh, we got to tune somebody up because they smarted off or they talked back. I spoke in one of our other meetings about watching cop watcher videos, and the police get really ticked off when the citizens cuss at them, when the citizens are challenging them, asking for their badge numbers and their names, and they show their tail. They're not interested in really protecting and serving. What they're doing, they're like, and it just reminds me of the difference between in the movie Transformers, where you have the Autobots that are like out to really save humanity, and you have the Decepticons, which are out to destroy humanity. And what the police do is they're like the Decepticons. They lie, they cheat, they steal. They have gangs, they have, you know, they run guns, they steal drugs, they run drugs, they traffic, do sex trafficking, they do rendition. Like there's all these things that they do, and nobody is talking about the culture of violence. And so even if they exclude domestic violence, like it's not violence, then, you know, they're just not being honest about the culture that police, it was born out of violence, right? Like they were slave catchers. They were there to, you know, kill Black people because they escaped and wanted freedom. Oh my gosh, how dare we? And it's just something that has continued for hundreds of years. And so there's a culture there that's being ignored, and 17,000 people being disappeared. That's atrocious. That's like when America freaks out about a government wiping out, you know, like ethnic cleansing in another country. And the government, our government, wants to go and start a war with that country, but it's completely okay for ethnic cleansing to be happening here. That's all I got.
Oh, thank you for that, Jeanette. We're gonna go ahead and move on to Gabriel, and then Josiah will be after. Thank you guys for waiting.
I really appreciate all of this analysis. And I think, in a way, I'm just going to restate what Mantu and Jeanette have just said, but I want to place slightly different emphasis on it. When the police are so-called off-duty, which is part of this, you know, how they're framing this, the police are continuing to serve their purposes as agents of the state. There's no such thing as being off-duty as a police officer, because there's no such thing as being off duty in war. And they don't stop assaulting people, and they don't stop having the mentality. One of the problems we have for our men and women in service when they come home is just adjusting. Their brains have been permanently at war the whole time they were away. It's not like that, just you flip a switch off. You have to slowly go through a process. It never, ever ends for cops. And so they're agents of the state, and that's a permanent condition. So to try to act like, oh, this guy, this wasn't a police action, this was him shooting somebody while he was off duty and drunk, does not actually make any sense. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Sam, is do you mind if we just take a quick look at Justin Nix? If I just do a quick screen share? I think it's maybe, I mean, we could do it later if you want. This isn't to be, look, I'm not that guy. I actually prefer the data and the analysis before this, but this matters. So y'all can, right? This is our expert who thinks it's cool how they figured out that 17,000 people were murdered and then the murders were misclassified. I'm sure it is cool in Nebraska because it's probably boring there. Or I don't know what his motivations are, but I just feel like it's important that what we're talking about in this, and who we're talking about is an extremely young extremely young man in the Midwest who is super Caucasian, like even whiter than me. And that's all I got. Killmonger.
Yeah, next up, Killmonger. I'm gonna run downstairs and get some water. So if I'm not back in time, just go to, move on to Scorpio and just keep raising your hands, and we'll just keep going down the line.
I gotcha. Well, I'll keep it brief. I was just gonna say, like, I actually want to reiterate something Gabe said. It's cops are cops. Off-duty cops are still cops. Don't believe me? Shoot one.
Right.
Like off-duty cops are still treated with all the authority. They still have all the authority that they have when they're in uniform. They can still do everything that they did as long as they have their gun on them.
Yep.
So this whole concept of, well, they were off-duty when they shot the person. You were still a cop. And you were still using that authority as a police officer because your wife knows that you're a cop and that you can get away with certain things if you choose to. We know about how y'all terrorize your families. We know.
Right.
And as far as the race war thing, like I don't believe you're far off with that. I was just asking on Twitter the other day about that audio from those North Carolina cops who were plotting a race war. They got caught on their cams sitting in their patrol car, casually plotting race war. They said they're going to set us back, those N-words back a few generations. So yeah, there's a whole culture casually plotting race war. They said they're going to set us back, those N-words back a few generations. So yeah, there's a whole culture in amongst police officers that is still very much anti-Black. And white supremacists have been allowed to roam free in this country for so long that they just join into these institutions and they're able to act with impunity. Like, this has to stop.
Oh, my turn?
Yeah, go.
So, all right. So I think it's very trivial and doesn't matter that much because I'll look at them and say, okay, so you care about that. So if an open source, if an independent organization wants to count that, they can just count that as its own category. Like, who cares? Like, and as Isaiah said, like, you know, off-duty cops are still cops. Shoot one, like, because there's so many videos on YouTube right now. You can search up one officer stopping their boss, stopping their chief that's off-duty because they did a traffic violation. And they was laughing and whatnot, and he was like, "Oh, thank you, boss." And he was like, "Oh no, sorry, do your job." And he didn't do nothing to the officer like this. And he knew it, so he knew him. He didn't do all that extra stuff. Like, there's a literal judge that used their power.
Before you go further, can I just jump in? Not only are when you're not on duty as a cop, you're still a cop. My mother used to work in the police station. She retired. Not only is it that, as a person who is cop adjacent, as a child of a cop adjacent person, you have privilege as well. I used to get pulled over driving to school in high school by this cop named Sergio all the time. And he would fuss at me and tell me he was going to call my mother. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I just had to throw that out there. It's not just cops. It's the family too.
Cause when there was a judge, the judge got stopped by this officer, and the judge was like, he came out the car. He's like, "Do you know who I am? Do you not know who I am?" And the officer was like, "What?" And then the officer came back, searched him up, and then he went back to the car and was like, "Have a good day, judge." And he's like, "Yeah, you bet." And he left. I was like, I never seen a cop get like treated like that on camera. Like, anyone who is in the state, seemingly in the system, government has power, doesn't have to deal with any of that. Like, doesn't have to deal with that at all. Like, it's literally on camera. It's everywhere at many places and whatnot. The only time in which it doesn't seem to apply is like when you're black, and also when you're not 100% black, but like when you're black and you're trying to go against it, and they start trying to plot against you and whatnot, depending on where you are. Like, there's some factors that affect this, but like, seen for many white people, when they have that power, it just goes their way all the time, whether they're on duty or off duty.
Alrighty, Jeanette. And after Jeanette, we'll let Patricia go, because I see that she's trying to get her hand up over there.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that videos that that I've seen on YouTube recently are police officers with a history of DUI, and they kill people and end up with the slap on the wrist. Like I watched this one video where this guy killed two people, who was going the wrong way on the highway, and ran into a father and a son. Both of them were killed instantly, and he was released to his parents. He was a young, like 20-something cop, and had a history of DUI. So their authority, their hubris, their ability to literally get away with hurting and maiming people isn't just a thing that happens on duty. It is something that is within the culture of how they're trained, so that they can push people around and get away with it in uniform or out of uniform. And what I find problematic about this article is that there's not more outrage about the fact that police can be violent, whether it's disappearing 17,000 people from gunshot wounds and murder, or whether they beat their wives and their children. Like, they're terrorists, and what they're doing is terrorizing people, and it's not okay. Like, it shouldn't be okay that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's it. All right, go ahead. Patricia, you're up next, right?
Yes, I wanted to say, like 20 years ago, I did domestic violence hotline for a couple of years, and the training was excellent, which helps. But historically, the police have not been helpful with domestic violence. They kind of support the domestic abuser. Yes, men get abused too, but they haven't been very supportive with either, because they're supporting the current power structure. And also, if a man is being abused, it's like, what's the matter with you? You can't take care of your business. So it's improved.
Yeah, it's literally a joke. They'll literally make a joke out of it. Mm-hmm.
It is a joke. I mean, not a joke. Yeah. So it's all about the privilege of thinking your entitlement to that it's okay to abuse someone else across their boundaries, and all that. It's just all related to violence and patriarchy to me. With some nuances. Because I experienced people calling, they had been threatened. Can you hear me? Okay. People pull out a weapon, threaten their family, abuse the dog to scare the family to get them to do what they want. You know, so like it's a control thing. You know, so those people shouldn't have guns. I try to put, you know, you talk about gun control. Okay, this is getting on a different topic, but maybe not really. But you talk about gun control. People who threaten their families with weapons shouldn't have guns. I mean, how is that not hard to understand? How is that hard to understand?
So Patricia, I have a question for you. What happens when the person who threatens their family with the gun is a cop? The people who used to live next door to my mother, he pulled a gun on his wife and his 2 kids. She ended up leaving him years later. But yeah.
Yep. And
that's just real. And he was a drunk and he was abusive.
Yeah. And drinking doesn't cause domestic violence, but it can amplify the wildness and the uncorked and add violence to it. But it doesn't really cause the violence. It's the assumptions within that person that they have the right to do these things.
No, he was just a mean person, but he was a real mean drunk.
Oh boy. I'd rather have somebody kind of sobbing. No, I'm sorry. You can take like a kitty cat drunk over a mean.
Like I said, I definitely take a kitty cat drunk over. I like a happy drunk actually.
Happy drunk. There you go.
I like a happy drunk over a because mean drunks are something else. But all right, where did I want to go with this? I had something I wanted to say, but I kind of got lost in it. So I'm gonna let Gabriel go, and then Jeanette, and then I want to slide back to the rest of the article because there's other stuff we need to bring up. I know I had an article I wanted to bring up from Ferguson, but Gabriel was talking about the kids knowing what's going on out there and how crazy it is. And I do vaguely remember there being a report where they were talking about where they had kidnapped people, like the police, and there were black sites. But I want to finish this up, and then I want to move to the next thing. I want to make sure we're not bouncing around too much so it's hard for people to follow. So let's so Gabriel, then Jeanette, and then we're going to go back to the article.
So for this section, I want to bring this back to reparations, and I want to bring this to John Brown leftism. So to me, this is, we've already started to sort of touch on how the police are, even servants of the state when they're not at work. But the trajectory of the life of a cop is intentionally designed to produce maximum violence for the state. The state needs the violence. So they start like a regular cop, and they, through several different paths, end up more and more violent. When they're out of control, when you can't hide them anymore, they go to the gang unit. And the gang unit goes to predominantly black neighborhoods. They'll go other places too, but we need to be very clear about what we're talking about, because it's conversations about the police can sometimes get to, the police are so mean to everybody. Why aren't they nicer to everybody? There's that problem too, because when you have power, you can abuse it or whatever. What we're talking about, and Jeanette already referenced this earlier, is slave catchers. Sam, you're mute again, just so you know. I think you just said so. Okay, sorry. Referred this to earlier that these are slave patrols, and that has not changed. The reality of the dynamic we're talking about is a culture and a country and an economy and management of the violence of the state that is about white people oppressing black people. It is necessary. So the point of the violence, part of the point of the violence is specific to black folks. And this is where John Brown leftism is different from other leftists, because they'll talk about how the purposes of a bottom caste is to economically exploit people. So you have surplus workers. Well, we frame in America, that's actually not you've got to start with how people are actually being treated. You need to have people to abuse. It's like the violence is the necessary foundation. The corrupt foundation of this country is the subjugation and abuse, specifically of black folks. You can't make this a broad or vague problem. And just like reparations, people will say, well, we have to reform the police, and what are we going to make sure that to ensure the police treat everybody better? I want the police to treat everybody better, but I will be very honest and say I don't care about that until you solve the problem of police murdering and disappearing black people first. And it's not about, I love everybody. But if you don't solve this problem first, you're not solving this problem. And we keep telling people this over and over again. And you got to start with reparative justice, because the truth is we don't get it. We don't understand how this country is organized. So you have to start with the economic dimension, because I promise you, if we give back the money that we've stolen from centuries of labor and murder and exploitation from Black folks, and now that part of our culture, that 20 to 25% of our population, which is, I think, what the real number is, has the wealth to start to really have the influence, we're not going to have these problems. Not at the scale we have it. Now try to pull over a Black person and say, I'm putting you in jail for no reason. That's the judge, because that's somebody who has assets and influence and wealth on the level that white people do. And now we've got a whole different situation. So that's I just wanted to kind of bring that around for this first section.
Thank you so much. All right, so I want Jeanette to go, and after that, Scorpio, I see you raised your hand, and I'm glad, because I was actually going to ask you to speak to what you were talking about in the chat. So after that, please do that, and then anything you want to speak about on top of that, please feel free to, and then we'll move back to the article.
So Ida posted in the chat about professional standards for police officers. They've never had professional standards. Their professional standard is to beat Black people. Like, that's the reason that they exist, is to control Black men, which then gets the women and the children in line, so that we are, as a collective, we are terrified of our interactions with police. And I sent pictures to Sam yesterday of the yard work, the landscaping that my husband has done in our front yard. I live in a peaceful, quiet neighborhood, like literally less than half a mile from the entrance of a military base in a military town. The police do not drive through my neighborhood, but my husband and my son specifically, when my son leaves the house, I am on pins and needles until he returns home, because he can encounter police. He works an hour from our house, and he at any time in his hour journey can encounter police. And so my point in saying all of this is that what this article really shows is that police are out of control more than even I imagined. And it's a horrible thing that 17,000 people have been harmed by police. And this article touches on it, and yet it's not a major news outlet story. Like, it's ridiculous that we have the live streamed murder of George Floyd in last year, and then we have this article come out and people have gone back to sleep. Joe Biden's in office. Everybody, white people can go back to brunch and go back to some semblance of normalcy in their lives, while Black people are still, at risk. We're still, under the boot of the authoritarian regime. That's all I've got.
Alrighty, then go ahead, Scorpio. Give it to us.
So when everyone is reacting to what the person is saying about the sources using off-duty cops, one reason that I feel like this person is saying this is because the article suggests one of the solutions is using these sources, like not necessarily using these specific sources, but imagine someone can make their own open source to collect this information, because we can't trust the government to be honest about it, because it points out that the people committing the violence are also in charge of reporting the deaths and reporting the violence, which they're not going to do honestly, because it seems to some medical examiners and physicians that they're being pressured to change and not include the cases that led to the death of the person that they're basically making the death certificate for. Like, this is something that is seemingly, as you're saying, cast in doubt, that it's like they're saying, well, we should not really trust these open source. I'm like, they could have said, well, these open sources could probably be more organized, but they're doing a good job in trying to, crack down on basically the lack of reporting, the discrepancies in reporting of police violence, because they don't just calculate the shooting, they calculate non-violence. Like, basically tasers and pepper sprays and everything. So they're going deep. And so the fact that like the article does not suggest that we should be using these more to try to, keep, to preserve the facts of what happened in certain cases, it just shows that they're kind of being like, low-key oppositional. Because like they suggest like, people having reforms and trying to, police cams and everything. Another thing that they don't even seem to include is the fact that like the medical examiners are pressured, like they are pressured to make because it's not just physicians, it can also be medical people that are on the scene that are, saying the cause of death. Because like you can also do that on like when you're on the scene. So one thing I also understood is maybe there should be a person that's not associated with the police or someone that's on the scene that can do it without the influence of the police and the people like that are in power, so that we can, have someone that is not from them trying to calculate and trying to, give us more accurate information, because the police keep showing that they're not trustworthy. They're not trustworthy. They're trying to, hide information. They're trying to misrepresent what's going on, because like they're put in the text. When they write down what happened, they don't include the police. That's why you're seeing like when people look it up, they can't find nothing. So I think that's the reason why the person in the article is saying, oh, they also calculate off duty. Like that's such a really trivial thing when you're really looking at what the study is trying to tell you, including the fact that the study also examines other open sources and examined these open sources and put them side by side. There's a whole table on that too, where they compare like which one is missing some information, why are they missing some information, because the open source is also misinformation. But they're trying to be nuanced about it, and this person article isn't giving that, isn't really doing it justice. So there's a lot to it.
Should I scroll up or
ask police killings? He has documented cases where the databases count, for example, domestic violence by off-duty officers as police killings, right? So I'm not saying that we don't need to track that in these sorts of databases, but I'm just saying that all police killings are not created equally, he says. I think there's definitely issues around exactly the criteria used. He says the IHME's Murray says the IHME's Murray, I see, okay. I think that's an important question, given that we're looking at multiple sources, but I don't think that it's really influencing the time trend we're seeing. In other words, the numbers are going up regardless. The study shows the death rate in these encounters dropping in the 1980s, then generally rising again since about 2000. The article also highlights the disparity in the mortality rate from African Americans, which it says is 3.5 times higher than that of whites. The article suggests that the disparity is caused by systemic racism in policing, but it doesn't specify how that happens. Specifically, it doesn't address whether police are more likely to use lethal force against African Americans, or whether non-policing factors lead African Americans to have more encounters with police. Murray says this analysis doesn't answer that. I don't think from a scientific point of view, we have enough information here to parse out how much of this is, basic differences in where people live, what sort of disadvantage they have, versus the actual specific actions of the police, he says. But as a public health expert, Murray says that the more we know about these deaths, the easier it is to know, the easier it will be to find policy solutions. It's the old saw, you manage what you measure. And so we've got to do a better job of tracking and what's actually happening, he says.
There's a lot in the study. There's like a lot of, like there is the global something disease type thing. There's a lot that they're using over here. So the way that he just kind of like trivializes it and whether or not is kind of disrespectful to what the study is trying to do. Like it's an extensive study. It's a very extensive study. Like I shared a figure that basically shows them comparing like the 3 open sources they use. So they're not acting like they're all the same. So it's just really crazy how they don't even, compare all the 3 open sources and sees which one like we can, what model can we use to have more accurate reporting? Like they're not talking about that. Like there's a lot that this person is talking about. Not even the state, like they even include states of mortality rate of every race, like non-Hispanic Black people, non-Hispanic white people, indigenous people, like they got all that too in there. And this person just focused on something like that. Like you said, the outreach is not enough. Because this, like, when you look at the when it comes to non-Hispanic Black people, it's atrocious. We're always in the red. We're always in the red. Like when you look at it, we're always.
All right, Jeanette, I see your hand up.
The thing that set me off even more with this article is where he says the article suggests the disparity is caused by systemic racism in policing, but it doesn't specify how that happens. He's new to this conversation. We know how it happens. Like, this is not a new conversation. It's new for him. So he's writing this article from a place where it's virgin territory for him. He doesn't understand how systemic racism in policing has existed since slave catchers were running around catching slaves that wanted freedom. And he says that it doesn't address, specifically, it doesn't address whether police are more likely to use lethal force against African Americans or whether non-policing factors lead African Americans to have more encounters with police, putting the blame on African Americans. And so the issue for me is that we know that they use more lethal force with African Americans. When you got a white man on YouTube high on meth trying to run over a cop, and the cop is running in the yard, running around in circles, trying to escape a Ford F-150. And when the meth head crashes and they pull him out of the truck, he's still alive. That's how we know that there is a disparity and there is systemic racism in policing. When a Black man using a counterfeit $20 bill ends up dead, but the white people who were looking to hang Nancy Pelosi and Trump's vice president, its name is escaping me right now. What's the dude's name? Somebody tell me.
Pence.
Pence. Thank you. When they're literally looking to hang the leaders of our government, and these people are getting slaps on the wrist, but Black people, when they encounter law enforcement,
for treason. Do not get that twisted. For treason.
For treason, yes. For treason, sedition, attempted murder. Like, they were literally there looking for them. It was attempted murder. And they're just, community service, ankle monitor. Yes, there is systemic racism. And so it's not a question. And people need to stop acting like it's a new question. They need to stop acting like this isn't a thing that has existed since the founding of this country. We need to call this out, because that part, to me, it invalidates whatever he's saying. Like, I'm not interested in what Nick, or whatever this guy's name is, I'm not interested in what he has to say, because he's coming from a place of oblivion and ignorance. He has no idea what he's talking about.
I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's obfuscation. I think that he knows, and he's just trying to downplay the reality. I mean, that's the way I see it, but maybe I'm.
Well, that's a possibility.
I mean, that's the way I see it.
Again, isn't that just how white supremacy works? Like, all you have to do is just downplay the extreme, right? It's like everything that we
exactly.
If you watch our show, when Josiah's talking about, you're just trying to de-radicalize our white people, right? So whereas the people on this, every person on this panel felt some level of outrage seeing, let me turn my camera on, y'all. So everybody on this panel felt some level of outrage, like listening to this article, right? And you're supposed to, but for other people, he's making it be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And he's downplaying it, right? So if you don't catch it, you don't understand. And I feel like a lot of things, it's the subtle ways that they program you, right? Like, if I come straight out and be like, I want you to believe this and do this, you're like, oh, whoa, whoa. But if I'm just subtle and being slightly dismissive of things, then you just get used to dismissing Black people, because everybody does it. It's the norm. It's subtle. It's very subtle. All right, go ahead, Gabriel.
Just very quickly, because I know you want to wrap this up. This is, and this is a little bit speaking to what you and Jeanette were just saying. There is no question that there is not a Black person with any power at NPR when you listen to or read this. Like, it tells you for a fact there's not another journalist there who's Black who saw this thing. The copy didn't show up anywhere for somebody from the, just from a Black American did not see this before it got published, or else they would have been like, you need to do a little rewriting here, or call this person, because that's the other glaring thing. It's like, okay, so you guys all are scratching your heads like, we don't understand systemic Black racism. Is there nobody that can explain systemic racism to you? You know that there is. Those phone numbers are in the office, or whatever, in your email if everyone's remote. And that's why people have to look at stuff like this. You got to look at Reset Race. You got to look at John Brown Leftists, because you really can't trust the media that you hear and read that's mainstream to give you correct information. And so, even for white people, you have friends who listen to NPR and they are pretty sure they're progressive because of it. Challenge them to watch us. You have a white friend, bring up this story and be like, what did you think about the coverage? And if they're like, it was all right, or I don't know, I didn't think about it, be like, I'm going to tell you when this episode comes up and I want you to watch this instead. And just let them know, see the difference. Like Sam was saying, it's like, look, NPR even sounds like hypnosis. Like you listen to that and it's like, do, la, 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 everything's fine. The voices, the music, everything. It's like 17,000 people were murdered, plus a new recipe for your summer barbecue. Like it's literally, they're trying to make you feel numb. Challenge your white friends to watch Reset Race, John Brown Leftists, because this is the information people need.
Perfect time to say that, right? So come on, like, comment, share, subscribe, like send this out to your friends. Especially, I feel like this show is less raunchy. But I feel like this is more, I feel like we got a lot of gut punch over here though. It's like, wow. But it's less cursing and raunchiness. So it's good for some of y'all, because I know some of y'all be like, oh my God.
I can curse if you want me to. I mean,
you know what? I think I'm pretty good in mixed up, but they be like, oh my God, why Sam curse so much? Because I can't. I'm angry. I'm an angry Negro. If Talia can be an angry Jewish woman, I can be an angry Negro. She said it in that was it that bad faith fucking thing when she was fucking, oh, poor thing.
Yeah.
So bad for her. I don't think me and Bree can talk. I think Mud got to go on Bree's show. Okay.
No, Mud doesn't.
Mud can't do it. No. You know who's got to go? All hell kill Kingmonger. All hell kill King.
That show,
that would be quite the interview.
Yeah,
that
all
would
hell
be...
King Killmonger. That's who got to go. Yep. He got the perfect. You didn't say, why you quiet? That's you. You would get her clean together. Church night.
Oh, for sure. I would love to have my just 5 minutes with Bree. Because like,
so for those of y'all who be like, why don't y'all go on Bree's show? She can talk to Killmonger.
I would love to. I've been watching you for so long, back when you were hanging out with Michael Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Rest in peace, I guess.
Yes, rest in peace. All right, Gabriel, was your hand up from before, or is this new?
Yeah, that's old.
Okay, cool.
Sorry.
So who wants to? Oh, sorry. Okay. Alrighty then. So let's move on to the next article. So we're gonna go to the Chicago Black site thing, and then we're gonna go to Ferguson and tie all of this. But Gabe already tied it to reparations, but we're gonna do it again. Like, we got time. So where are we at too? So actually let's pause here.
The disappeared. Chicago police detain Americans at abuse-laden Black site. The Chicago Police Department operates an off-the-books interrogation compound, rendering Americans unable to be found by family or attorneys while locked inside what lawyers say is the domestic equivalent of a CIA Black site. The facility, a nondescript warehouse on Chicago's west side known as Homan Square, has long been the scene of secretive work by special police units. Interviews with local attorneys and one protester who spent the better part of a day shackled in Homan Square described operations that deny access to basic constitutional rights. Alleged police practices at Homan Square, according to those familiar with the facility who spoke out to The Guardian after its investigation into Chicago police abuse, include keeping arrestees out of official booking databases, beating by police resulting in head wounds, shackling for prolonged periods, denying attorneys access to the secure facility, holding people without legal counsel for between people as young as 15. At least one man was found unresponsive in Homan Square interview room and later pronounced dead. Brian Jacob Church, a protester known as one of the NATO, was questioned at Homan Square in 2012 following a police raid. Officers restrained Church for the better part of a day, denying him access to an attorney before sending him to a nearby police station to be booked and charged. Homan Square is definitely an unusual place, Church told The Guardian on Friday. It brings to mind the interrogation facilities they use in the Middle East. The CIA calls them black sites. It's a domestic black site. When you go in, no one knows what's happened to you. The secret warehouse is the latest example of Chicago police practices war on terrorism. While those abuses impacted people overseas, Homan Square, said to house military-style vehicles, interrogation cells, and even a cage, focus on Americans, most often poor, black, and brown. Unlike a precinct, no one taken to Homan Square is said to be booked. Witnesses, suspects, or other Chicagoans who end up inside do not appear to have a public searchable record entered into a database indicating where they are, as happens when someone is booked at a precinct. Lawyers no way of finding their whereabouts. Those lawyers who have attempted to gain access to Homan Square are most often turned away, even as their clients remain in custody inside. It's sort of an open secret of attorneys that regularly make police station visits. This place, if you can't find a client in the system, odds are they're there, said Chicago lawyer Julia Bartmus. Chicago civil rights attorney Flint Taylor's Homan Square represented a routinization of notorious practice in local violates the 5th and 6th Amendments of the Constitution. This Homan Square revelation seems to me to be an institutionalization of the practices that date back more than 40 years, Taylor said, of violating a suspect or witness's right to a lawyer and not to be physically or otherwise coerced into giving a statement. I'll just start from the quote, this Homan Square. This Homan Square revelation seems to me to be an institutionalization of the practice that dates back more than 40 years, Taylor said, of violating a suspect or a witness's rights to a lawyer and not to be physically or otherwise coerced into giving a statement. Much remains hidden about Homan Square. The Chicago Police Department did not respond to the Guardian's questions about the facility, but after the Guardian published this story, the department provided a statement insisting, without specifics, that there is nothing untoward taking place at what is called the sensitive location, home to undercover units. CPD, Chicago Police Department, abides by all laws, rules, and guidelines pertaining to any interviews of suspects or witnesses at Homan Square or any other CPD facility. If lawyers have a client at any other facility, they are allowed to speak to and visit them. It also houses CPD's evidence recovered property section, where the CPD, Chicago Police Department, abides by all laws, rules, and guidelines pertaining to any interviews of suspects or witnesses at Homan Square or any other CPD facility. If lawyers have a client at any other facility, they are allowed to speak to and visit them. It also houses CPD's evidence recovered property section, where the public is able to claim inventoried property, the statement says, something numerous attorneys and one Homan Square arrestee have denied. There are always records of anyone who is arrested by CPD, and this is not any different at Homan Square, it continued. The Chicago police statement did not address how long into an arrest or detention those records are generated or their availability to the public. A department spokesman did not respond to a detailed request for clarification. I would like to pause here, if that's okay.
Oh, no, that's perfect. Please do. I'm gonna, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I'm in Chicago. This is no one's surprised if I say this is all not true, the Chicago police response, and that everything that's being described in Homan Square, I know to be true. I mean, we know, if you're in the community, you know people who have been in Homan Square and other places as well. But the point that I wanted to make, which is maybe minor to some people, but I think extremely important, is The Guardian is trying to connect this to wars overseas in the context of the war on terror. And that's as far, I mean, I appreciate that they're doing that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Like we were talking about before, like the slave patrols, this goes back, there's no difference between domestic war and international war in America. And so we also know John Burge, many people who watch this show will know who John Burge is, just an absolutely brutal criminal in the Chicago Police Department who had a squad under him who routinely tortured people. And all of the techniques they used were techniques that he perfected while he was in Vietnam. And that's not an unusual story. The connections between, I mean, it was literally, there were things that he would do. He had a way that he would electrocute people. And I'm not going to go into it. The details are so gory that we don't need to freak people out. But he had a way he would electrocute people that was essentially recreating a device that was really kind of crude in Vietnam, but it was all he could find material for. So in America, he actually could have just gone to Home Depot and got everything he needed, a brand new torture device. But what he had learned to do, he learned to do with a little here, a little there. And it was in a way actually harder for him to get the right kind of battery and the right, this is, it never ends, it back and forth. And I'll say it again, I mean, we know what Holman is, the West Side. These are Black neighborhoods. When King was murdered, the West Side of Chicago, among people riding all over the country, was unique in its intensity. America has waged war on the West Side of Chicago at the highest levels for decades. This is a story about Black people being captured and disappeared and being presented as regular folks. And in fact, if I had to guess, the NATO 3, 2 out of 3 of them at least are white people. I would just guess, because they're protesting NATO, which is a different kind of story. But I also understand, because people of privilege are more comfortable talking about their experiences with the police, because they still have that illusion that the police have to follow rules. And so I'm guessing that this NATO 3 guy is probably someone who looks, a little like me. But this is actually, the story here is a story about how we take the methods of war internationally and bring it back domestically and wage our race war against Black folks. And then there's also collateral damage.
Raised to believe, and by now they helplessly believe, that no matter how terrible their lives may be, and their lives have been quite terrible, and no matter how far they fall, no matter what disaster overtakes them, they have one enormous knowledge and consolation, which is like a heavenly revelation. At least they are not Black. Now I suggest that of all the terrible things that can happen to a human being, that is one of the worst. I suggest that what has happened to white Southerners is in some ways, after all, much worse than what has happened to Negroes there. Because Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama, cannot be considered, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure that, he likes to get drunk. He's, after all, one's got to assume, and he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him to use the club, to menace with the gun, and to use the cattle prod. Something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breast, for example. What happens to the woman is ghastly. What happens to the man who does it is in some ways much, much worse. This is being done, after all, not 100 years ago, but in 1965, in a country which is blessed with what we call prosperity, a word we won't examine too closely, with a certain kind of social coherence, which calls itself a civilized nation and which espouses the notion of the freedom of the world. And it is perfectly true from the point of view now simply of an American Negro. Any American Negro watching this, no matter where he is, from the vantage point of Harlem, which is another terrible place, has to say to himself, in spite of what the government says we can't do anything about it. But those are white people being murdered in Mississippi work farms, being carried off to jail. Those are white children running up and down the streets. The government would find some way of doing something about it. We have a civil rights bill now. We had an amendment, the 15th Amendment, nearly 100 years ago. I hate to sound again like an Old Testament prophet, but if the amendment was not honored then, I don't have any reason for believing the civil rights bill will be honored now.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to be long. I just think that it's interesting in these conversations because it seems to me that the torture of American citizens is not really a concern when it's Black people, but when you tie it to like what's happening in other countries, there seems to be a level of sympathy that the American public will give to those causes. And I know I don't want to really get into like the comparison too heavy. It's just that we're supposed to have a certain amount of rights in this country, and the fact that our rights are being violated on a daily basis just gets swept under the rug. And there's just no compassion in the general public to actually, or concern really, to investigate this thoroughly and to change it. It just seems to be like we accept some symbolic gesture, and then once we get a little bit of fatigue, we move on to the next thing. I'll leave it there.
Ooh, that's really good. Just for future, I think one of these days, one of these Sundays, we're gonna have a watch party of, sorry, everybody make sure you're muted. I want to do a watch party of post-traumatic slave syndrome, one of the lectures, and we might have to sit down and have a very raw conversation section by section, because I think it's one thing to watch it, but I think it'd be another thing to sit down and us actually have a discussion about it. And I think that's the easiest way for us to do it without all of us taking time to read the book, even though I would love to, but I know I can't do that in the next month. Like, I could try, but I got too much on my plate. So I think that's an easy way for us to bring the information to people, and hopefully they'll get curious and decide that they want to read the book. So, all right, Scorpio, you were up. Thank you for waiting.
So with this Hunt Square situation, I looked at an article linked from the article that was just read, and another one too. This is like it's the tip of the iceberg, because the police officers are seemingly plainclothes in there, like they don't have to wear uniform, and it seems like they have like armored vehicles in the garage, and they're describing the rooms, and these is coming from ex-cops and attorneys that was granted access. One thing that the officers told the attorneys was that they have to leave their phone, then they can come in. So I guess you can't record anything or whatever, because they take your device. It's where you can't like do anything. So that's what they described though. Like there's a room that is just a cage, and it's just a room, and they got lights. And apparently one of the people that was investigated was an officer who has jailed a lot of black men, and they were Chicago detective turned Guantanamo Bay torturer. And they're examining their cases now on the people they arrested and how they've quote unquote interrogated Black people into trying to get, charges. This is pretty deep. Like there is no signs, just red bricks, and there's nothing, like they don't really give you the idea that this is a police facility. Because in there they got drugs, and then they got drugs that they seemingly recovered or they stored. Like this is a whole police facility. Just people don't know that it's right there.
No, that's real. Okay, does anybody have anything else? Like, oof. I don't even have a lot, just because like it's just frustrating, right? Because this article is 6 years old, right? And the only reason why I pulled it up is because I feel like a lot of people missed this article, right? Like, Patricia, did you hear about this article when it came out? See? So it's like we have to pull it back, but it's just like we keep talking about these. So 6 years ago, we know about black sites, right? And here we are now. And now we know that all these now we know that all these murders are happening and that they've been misclassified. It's just, when do we stand up and say enough is enough?
It reminds me of Bantu told me how, like, when people was coming to me and they was talking about everyone else, they always trivialize the fact that in America there is a current genocide happening, and it's been going on.
This is our third one. Sorry, I'm sorry for talking over you.
It happens too much, and then people don't really think of the scale of it. Like, it continues to happen every time. So the trauma, the distrust, everything is there, and then people don't even want to consider it when they're discussing these issues.
It's just a lot. It's so much. Like, Gabriel, can you do me a favor? Can you pull up the definition of genocide and read it for me? Because I don't think people understand that we check those boxes. I think people just think that Black people are just complaining and that, we're tired of a little discrimination. I don't think that they understand that Black people have been going through genocide through multiple generations and are in a current one right now.
Yeah, they think it's off-color jokes and, just insults, but they don't take into account like how our rights are just constantly violated and how we're basically disenfranchised from so many sectors of this society. I'm sorry, go ahead, Gabriel.
You know enough. Which one fit? Which one?
Well, I want to. This is what I'd like to do. Here's a kind of general one, which is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. I think that's solid, but I also was going to pull from the UN definition, because I think, people feel like, who's serious about this stuff? It's an international problem. It's not, nothing like this happens here. So the UN definition, I'm just going to read this part. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part. I'm going to reread that. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So that's a little more detailed, but honestly, I think you don't have to tick all those boxes for it to be genocide. As it turns out, in America, we have.
Yes. We literally check all of the boxes. So I need people to understand that this is much deeper than what you understand it to be. Because there's a disconnect between Black America and white America. We are living in very different worlds and we're living in very different lives. And the only way you're gonna really understand is if we start connecting, because the media is not telling y'all what's going on in our communities. And then they do these little drop of an article, but that wasn't all over YouTube. I know some Black people talked about it, but it wasn't all over YouTube. It wasn't all over the news. It was a blip and then it was gone. So, sorry, I'm just like, we have so much work to do. It's just so frustrating to me because it's just like, our people are dying every day, right? And when people are like, well, why don't, reparations should wait. You should put reparations on the back. My people are dying every day. I understand that your families are struggling and I want to help you too, but it cannot be at the sacrifice of my people. Either we can get it together, i.e. we get reparations, we do this federal jobs guarantee, we expand Social Security so people have enough money, because you were talking about how you have a UBI, Patricia, but you actually have the BI part. The U part is the universal part, which ends up being the problem a lot of times, but it could be expanded to cover anybody that needs to be covered, who cannot work or who cannot work, or, you know, for people who decide that somebody wants to be a primary caregiver to a child, we can let them do that. You know, there's going to be a million of reasons why people can't or don't want to work. We could expand Social Security to cover those people. For everybody else, the federal jobs guarantee, and we can build the new society that we want. Like, we can do that together. Like, you can give us reparations and we can fight for all this other stuff. And then we can have our Medicare for all. And we can have our housing as a human right. And we can have all of these goodies and things that we need. But the only way the floodgate's going to come through is if y'all give us reparations. And we're going to have to get out here and become MMT evangelists so we can explain to people how we pay for all the goodies that come to us. And how we pay for it is the government makes the money. They print all of it. We can never run out of it. We can never have to borrow from another country for it because it's ours. You can't borrow something that they don't process or make, because that would be counterfeit. So we can pay for everything, and we'll put more of it in. We have a video with Steve Grumbine where he came on the Reset Race show. I'm actually going to have him come on this show next year so he can talk to us about MNT and a federal jobs guarantee. I plan on he's definitely excited about stuff, and I know he's an evangelist for that, so we're going to make sure. But the thing, what I'm saying is, if we come together and fight for the table, we can get everything we need. But if not, Sam's going to burn up the table and we're going to starve to death together. Because my people are already starving and dying. Go ahead, Patricia. You're new to this. Patricia's never had to take this up front.
Don't show me your palm on the person. Check it out, man. Okay.
I'm sorry, Scorpio, you can go after Patricia. Patricia,
I don't want to make work for you. Cut that out. No, I'm just going to say, for the audience, what was that statistic about Black wealth and white wealth? I think that would be a great time to say that, and I don't have it in my head.
No, I'll pull it up. Actually, I'll pull up Verity's thing. Go ahead and keep talking. I'll put it in there. Keep talking.
Yeah,
We'll
I think that is so important, along with, you know, getting up to date with everything that's happened since slavery to Black Americans. So between those two, I mean, you got justice and you got the justice of the pain and suffering. That's going to be like so healing, I think, for a lot of people, Black people and white people, and bringing you guys up so that we can all work together to make America better. You know, and all those universal programs, this is what I've come to realize. You guys are right. I mean, the programs aren't going to help if you're all still sitting on the bottom and being abused. So, and also the poor white people, but obviously, it's different. As far as
true, but they're valid too.
Yeah,
a better country for everybody is a better country for us all, right? So we got to care about everybody, but no more sacrifice for Black people.
I think we really need.
All right, go ahead.
I don't see how America can make it and move forward with all these challenges we have. Starving and abusing our people, what kind of thing is that? So we need some justice and parity.
Sure. All right, give me a second. I'm gonna pull up that chart, Patricia. Yeah. Patricia, this is Black wealth and white wealth put together by quintile. So if you look at this chart, you will see at every level, Black people have less money than white people, even the poor whites. The poor whites are at least they're in the positive. They're poor, they're real poor, but they're in the positive. We're negative. Then you get to the second quintile, right? So 66,520. Let's just round up for extra money, right? 67,000. We're gonna round up on ours too, up to 1,200. So people who have $1,200 don't necessarily live next to people. Well, no, we can still kind of live together there because we're still kind of poor, but you see the difference, right? We barely have much more money than your first quintile. So you basically could move the second quintile of Black people into the first. So basically, Your poor, ours that have a little bit of money are just like a little bit better off than your poor. And that's in the second quintile, right? We get to the third quintile, 189,000, right? Next to 24,000. Y'all don't live in the same neighborhoods. Fourth quintile, 436,000 to 85,730, right? And then we get into the top, right? Because Sagar likes to talk about, oh, it's only in the top 10% that there's the gap. If you notice, there's a gap at every level. But let's say you make it, right? Top white families, top five quintile, $1.6 million. Black folks, 324,000. We can round it up to 325. So we don't have the money that you have. So when you talk to me about us needing to fix class, if you really wanted to fix class, none of the programs that you're proposing fix class. It doesn't fix it for you guys. It does not shift the actual amount of money in each group, because y'all keep talking about class stuff. We got to stop talking about income. We got to stop talking about income and start talking about wealth. Or we got to start talking about both of them, because I don't see how we move forward without actually doing some type of wealth redistribution. Because everybody, like they always like, it's all class. But if you notice, if you see, Black people are the lowest class of the race. So our race is our class. We're the bottom. So Blacks' race is their class, and their class status is the bottom. So there you go. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense, but yeah, so if we're saying their class is the most important thing, then Black have our own class, and we're at the bottom of poor whites. Boom.
Yeah, and that's from inheritance, because you're constantly, every time you turn around, being prevented from borrowing money, building wealth, getting a house, opening a business, working together. They come in and destroy what you're doing or restrict what you're doing. So how can you pass things down to your kids? Even if it's, $50,000 or something.
All right, I would have let Scorpio go because he had his hand up like forever. And after him, go ahead, Mud, because Scorpio has been so patient. He doesn't talk over us or anything. He's so
amazing. As you guys talk about the racial wealth gap and the discrepancies and everything, it was about the trivialization of the violence that's currently happening to Black Americans in this country. It was the fact that when people try to point out this is officer that was arresting people for drug charges, and this district attorney just looked at all those files and those videotapes in which the officer basically stopped people, and they found out that for over 100 cases, the officer planted drugs on camera in the cars of people and got them, jailed and charged for a crime they didn't really commit. And the district attorney that went and told people got in trouble for that from their boss, who said, "Why did you do that?" So when it comes to the underreporting of people, when it comes to the police violence, that stuff also is not really measured either. That stuff isn't really included. Like, there's so much stuff that's ignored, and like just in general.
I came off mic because Patricia said the thing about inheritance. And it's not that I want to downplay that. It's just that people will point to like these studies that say, basically that show that, that it isn't necessarily inheritance for a lot of white people. And there's a little trick to that, because inheritance is only talking about the assets that you receive once, like, your parent passes away or something like that. When someone passes away, it does not include wealth transfers that happen during your parents' lifetime or your family member's lifetime. So, and I think that kind of illustrates this. And I know it's not an example that everyone can relate to, because obviously it's kind of crazy. But you remember when Mitt Romney talked about, and it's kind of a controversial thing where he talked about you can go to your parents and borrow $1 million.
Mitt Romney actually said 20,000, but for Black people, he might as well said $1 million.
Well, I thought the quote was $1 million, but either way, you're talking
No, it was something
about,
like 20,000, but it was just but for black people, it's crazy. Yeah. And
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
but yeah, if your family does not have, either way, the example, basically what I'm saying is if your family does not have that wealth, you can't just easily do that. And for a lot of black people, that's not something that you can do during your parents' lifetime or after their death. But the discrepancy will still be there. It will show up as far as the inequality in wealth, but it's not going to show up if you're just looking at inheritances.
In Mud, then there's like, the inheritance of a legacy slot at an Ivy League. So you look at someone like George Bush, who was clearly not intelligent enough. If Harvard was a competitive university, he would not have made it in. But he was a legacy. You're never going to get that. And literally, probably black folks will never have a relevant legacy slot in Ivy Leagues, because even if you do reparations now and folks start getting treated the same like that, you got all these white folks who have been having kids, and you got all generations Kennedys. Forget it. You could have 20 Kennedys in line for a spot at Harvard, and you could have black folks waiting forever. So some of that is so intangible and yet so important that literally made him president, because people, when they said he wasn't bright enough to be president, which I think was literally true. I don't think he had the cognitive capacity. They said, well, he has an MBA from Harvard. What are you talking about?
Facts. All right.
Do a shout out to Kim Janey, mayor of Boston, first black mayor of Boston.
Okay.
Who unfortunately was not reelected. Boston just missed a huge opportunity. She got that spot. She basically slid in, like she wasn't elected in. Someone else left, so she had it, and she was doing some good work. But we're about to kind of see Boston's opinion of black folks. We're about to see at least part of the reason why they weren't ready for someone to prioritize that group.
Well, let's look at I want to get super in the weeds, but here's something I like that caught my eye. Boston Metropolitan Statistical Area Sample Characteristics, right? So US Blacks, 71 observations, 43% have college degrees, 24% are married, 24.8%, so might as well say 25. Average age is 55. Median income is 41,000, which is, the Puerto Ricans are struggling in Boston. Jesus. All righty, let's keep on going. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We see, hey, listen, you gotta call it out where you see it. I'm gonna keep going. Like, oh, but damn. See, this is why people need to get on board with the rest of my agenda. Y'all out here trying to fight me about not getting reparations, and y'all sitting around here with 25,000 income. We need a federal jobs guarantee at like $30 an hour. If we have that, there's no way that you make that a year. So, all right, I want to keep going, but I just wanted people to see this. So like almost half, over 40% of the people that they're looking at have bachelor's degrees. So think about that. If the wealth is $8, 40-something% of these folks got bachelor's degrees. Just think about that. So you got a bachelor's degree to have $8. You might have had more money if you did it. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the actual thing where it shows. Oh, it gets into everything. These are the financial assets. I'm not going to go into this. One of these days, we'll have to really get through this, though, because I could go through this. I'm going to cut a lot of this fat, too. U.S. Black wealth, $8. Caribbean Blacks, 12,000. Puerto Ricans, 3,000. We all, oof, Jesus. Other Hispanics. Look at the white number at the top, 247. Look at that though. That's just wow. So white folks got 247, almost 248,000. Everybody else broke. We the brokest, but everybody else broke. Think about this. This is wow.
This is the foundation, right? This is one of the colonial cities. And so the culture's deepest, this is the real deal. This is the culture. It's about extracting wealth from everybody else. Did you know those white people aren't working hard? Not all of them who have that money.
Well, where is Boston? You know, these are
Right.
people always think about slave states like the South, but Boston is old as shit. That's
This is so important, Sam. That point, yep.
like, so that wealth didn't go nowhere. And for people who let go of their slaves, remember, the people who still had slaves in certain places didn't have to give up their slaves to a certain point because that was for the South. And then on the other hand, a lot of places didn't get rid of slavery till like 60 years before the war. So there was all that wealth accumulated in those families before, and they got to keep that wealth because they sided with the North, so they didn't get robbed of it. Y'all got to start thinking more. You got to start weaving stuff together a little bit better. And maybe you do, and I just know a lot of history. You got anything, Scorpio?
There are basketball players that talk about how, you know, anti-Black Boston is and why sometimes they don't want to go there and play for Boston because it's anti-Black, and they basically have to deal with, you know, a lot of antagonism from the Boston audience.
No, that's real. And the thing that is so insane to me is, how do you, as a 5-foot-ish person, and this goes for men and women, because I've seen women do this, think that you can sit and jeer and poke at a 6'8", 260, 250, 200, you understand what I'm saying, pound man. Y'all are brave. That's just how y'all know that Negroes are bound by money, right? Because if these people didn't make this kind of money, they would haul off and whoop your ass.
Yep. I always wonder, you wake up one day, you go to this game, and your thing is, I'm about to call that person right there the N-word.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was like what you wanted to choose that day, how you wanted to spend your time. But I'm like, man, I don't know what they because there's a lot of people in basketball that are anti-Black, and people don't talk about that. A lot of people in that sport are anti-Black, and many basketball players talked about how they had to be subjected to anti-Black slurs from the audience, and it goes unnoticed for the interest of the league,
of course,
which is a lot of them is owned by a lot of white owners, because you know there's owners. Nobody talks about the owners, the general managers, there's people in the staff. So you know they own the team.
Old money. It costs a lot of money to own a basketball team or a football team. That's old money.
A lot of them are bankers, connected with powerful people. People don't even know that either. Like sometimes it's like 4 owners, and they co-own, and they literally might be connected with the bank or own a bank. So it's just a lot of them are billionaires. Like a lot of them are one of the richest people, like part of the richest people in the world, just in general.
All right. Does anybody have anything else?
I want to say something behind what Scorpio just said, and really what you said too, Sam, because this is so. I hope people, as they're listening, are thinking about the economics that are being laid on them, because I think it's so critical to what we're talking about, that this isn't, first of all, just like the job of the police never ends. It's like the job of our economy is to hold on to the money that was stolen from Black people. Like, it's a real specific job. So things like basketball, or, you know, any of the entertainment complexes, the big, you know, these vast empires of wealth that people have, a lot of that is allowed specifically, if not exclusively, because the point is to keep the wealth away from the people from whom is stolen. So it's not, you know, if you're just looking at face value at, I don't know, a Black billionaire, and so you feel a little better about things, or an entertainment, like whether it's music or sports or whatever, you think there's some progress or whatever, look behind whatever is right in front of you and realize that the actual wealth is all in the same place doing the same thing. A whole bunch of money was stolen, and Sam just said this, the South, it's not like the North wasn't, everyone was down with slavery in America. We should not, Abraham Lincoln's family were slaveholders. It's not like there was always this argument, and like the stupid South where white people were evil and wicked, and the smart, virtuous North everyone was down for it if they were white. Everyone said, let's build a country where we're so comfortable with this idea that we're not going to treat black folks like citizens, that we can literally write down all men are created equal, and we don't have to explain that we're not including everyone. Like, we all understand, not that guy, you know, there's not even a reason to have that conversation, just like it didn't have to be, you know, but we're not going to let women vote. Like, there were just certain things that you just didn't even have to say. But it was universal, it was pervasive. And people need to, as they're listening to all of this, stitch it together. What we're trying to lay on you is like a range of understanding. That it's not about keeping black folks down to $8 worth of assets every day in Boston is hard work. And the reason Boston is so good at this is that they've been at it since the founding of the country, 1600s, 1500s, from the beginning of the invention of this diabolical enterprise. And we got to fix it, or we got to burn it down. That's what Sam's saying. That's why, if John Brown Leftists in a sentence, we would like to fix it, but if not, we got to burn it down, because we'll all fail. Look, no country, just check your history internationally, no country that tries to commit genocide against one part of the population then is successful economically. You ruin your economy through your madness. So we're all going down one way or the other. It's just, if you don't fix this problem, there's not a workaround.
That's what Sam said about like the North. The KKK leader 100 years ago said that, oh no, we stronger in the North and the South. Like, he said it out of his own mouth. And it was funny because he's like, because, you know, when you look at stories and you look at events that took place, many people weren't necessarily living in the area. They just traveled there. They literally traveled there, went there, and said, oh, I'm going to be there with my KKK brethren to take down the black person from being, you know, franchised.
Yeah, no, facts.
One thing I wanted to say about like just this country in general is how it's always been geared to produce 90% of the resources for white people. That's never not been the case in this country. So when you start talking about, well, it's black culture, well, black culture has changed, at least from slavery to now. Yet that 90% number has never changed. Like, you can't, I don't understand what people don't understand about this. So it's really, really difficult for me to like try to reach out and like grab people and say, hey, don't you see we're all being robbed? Black people, like black people are getting it the worst. Like, and you're working with the system that's screwing you. It completely boggles my mind.
I think it's historical revisionism. There's like certain areas where they teach people in elementary school that slavery was good for us, and that we was happy and dancing with rainbows in the sky. That's what they tell kids sometimes, or they be like, well, we've made this progress to end racism, but it ain't over. It's never been over. Those old people that, like, there's literal videos of the like 70s and the 80s where there was a lot of anti-blackness in communities, and you know, you have black children wondering why am I being treated like this? Like, it just gets swept under the rug, and people keep thinking that everything is over, but like, no one, they never ask themselves, like, no one, because you know, you're young, like somebody's young in school and they're a child, but like the person that's reading it never asks themselves, wait a minute, where did all those people go? Where did like the people that was committing all these acts of violence go after like they passed legislation? Did they just go home and not do nothing anymore? Did they not have kids? Did they not teach their kids and, you know, give their kids all this stuff? Like, it's questions that people don't ask when they're kind of like, you know, basically brainwashed by propaganda, and it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder, like, in 2021, why are we still here? In the information age, by the way, too, because you can Google some of this stuff.
Well, I wanted to jump in real quick because it's interesting that, you know, we kind of had this show talking about the brutality of police and how, you know, it's a thing that we're currently dealing with. Like it's not something like they try to make it seem like all of the issues that we're talking about are in some great distant past. And the reality is that we're still dealing with this stuff. Even though like Martin Luther King kind of gets whitewashed, especially when it comes to the I Have a Dream speech, there is a segment of that speech that no one really pays attention to. And it's the part where he talks about when the work of civil rights would be done. And I don't necessarily agree with this, but it is a good point that he made. And basically he's saying that his work would be done when police brutality is ended. And the only part of that speech we always hear about is, you know, about the children playing together and equality. There are some parts of that speech that people really need to look at because it is still applicable to today, to our situation today. And I mean, we have not gotten to that point that everyone seems to think we gotten to. And they use that speech in this twisted way to try to argue that.
That's good. Does anybody have anything else? If not, I have.
Yeah, about that whitewashing part, like Ronald Reagan was on camera whitewashing MLK just to oppose affirmative action, saying that Martin Luther King wouldn't want this. And that sort of sentiment has stood the test of time when people are bringing up that you're not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King wouldn't want what you want. He wouldn't care about race, et cetera, et cetera. Never understanding that like MLK was saying thing. MLK was inspired by people they don't even know that they would not even like to this day. And now understand that Ronald Reagan was on the phone with Richard Nixon talking about how we were monkeys and whatnot, like literally disrespecting Black people and treating Black people as if they were just animals. Same dude that's basically trying to use MLK about equality. Like, I don't think they understand how, you know, white people kind of white people try to pretend as if they give a damn when really like they have nefarious intentions all the time. And some folks just try to think that it's just because you're very hostile and spiteful in some way. But in actuality, you're very observant of what's going on. And they're not wanting to pay attention to what's actually going on.
Definitely true. I think white people also have double consciousness. And like, it's like almost psychopathic to where like they can sort of turn off their humanity in a way, or at least not apply it to Black people. And I think that comes with like, not necessarily like the biological, the genetics of being a white person. I think it comes with the sociology of being a white person. That's
a good way of saying it. That's a good way of saying it, because that's what we people try to point out, that it's not that you're born this way. It's like it's the circumstances of what the society just is and how it's been constructed, and it's been like this for a very long time.
I was gonna say that's pretty much it, right? It's socialization and these mental constructs. And then when you try to talk to somebody, try to talk to a white person about what Black people are going through, and you know, their eyes glaze over, and you know, it's like the same reaction, even talking about reparations. And get to that now. These Black people. I mean, that's the only reason. But yet press them and they can't say, well, explain your thoughts to me on that. Or maybe look at your thoughts more. Where are you getting these ideas? Here's some facts about what's going on. Maybe reconsider. I mean, some people intentionally don't want to hear about it, and others, they just, you know, you're over here somewhere and they think you're fine. That's not true.
I think the worst part is that you have to prove it exists. And that means that inherently to them, it's not proven that like neutrally that it doesn't exist to them. Like the fact that you have to prove it is a problem. Like you should already know it exists. But the fact that you don't know it exists means this environment, whatever this institution is, or this country or this society has not acknowledged the history and the current ongoing oppression of groups of people. The fact you have to prove that it exists when like you can clearly see that most presidents except Barack Obama have all been white men. Yeah. And many of them own slaves, because I know they try to whitewash history again by talking about how Donald Trump is dangerous, but not including the fact that, you know, you have multiple presidents that owned slaves. What they did and how they, you know, violated the humanity of the people that they considered property. The legislation they were passing, even the fact that when they, you know, stopped the importations of slaves, that the reason they stopped that was because they didn't want too many slaves in their country. They don't want no insurrection. As they were trying to stop that during the, you know, all the stuff they had with the slave patrols and the fact that they was trying to stop slave revolts. I don't think they comprehend their own history.
Well, that's why we got a lot of stuff to go through. I can't wait to read Gerald Horne's The Counter-Revolution of 1776 with this group, because I'm telling you, when he be talking about the slave revolts, woo, baby, somebody find me a book on slave revolts, a good one too, where they just be talking about all of it. I need all that good stuff, because woo.
I mean, like, I have a couple of books if you need some.
Of course.
But like, if you give me book titles, you know, I
can look up. I can start looking. I just personally don't have any outside of where he touches on it briefly in the book, but I know there's books written that are
because I know I have the Louisiana one, and I think there's a couple of more books that goes into like specific slave revolts, because step it away, like all over
for sure. And that's why I want to bring that. I want to bring that back for sure. Here, let me play this part because I want to kind of double back to where he was talking about in the textbooks, how in the textbooks they teach you that the slaves were happy and, you know, slavery was a good, and but I wanted to get into, you know, well, why is that? So I want to play this simple video. Let me know if y'all want me to stop it anywhere in the video where we can kind of talk about it some more, because normally I put the videos in later, but I think it's good for us to discuss it, right? Since we all here just talk about stuff. My lighting is going to start to get more and more terrible as the sun moves behind out here. And at my mother's house, I can't smoke in her house, and I have a serious smoking addiction. So y'all are just going to have to let me live. So I'm just going to be funky with the camera for a while until I finally decide to go in the house, or until it gets dark enough for me to prop a light up. We believe the things we believe. We believe that reparations has to come first because of everything that we've learned. So I got to get y'all caught up, because once you're caught up, if you still don't care, then you can go about your merry way. But I feel like most of you guys are good people and you're going to feel differently. So, all right, let me play this video.
Listen to how this textbook describes slavery.
The master often had a barbecue or a picnic for his slaves. Then they had a great frolic. Even while working in the cotton fields, they sang songs. The beat of the music and the richness of their voices made work seem light.
Yikes, that's from History of Georgia, a textbook published in 1954 that was taught across junior high schools in Georgia for decades. That sort of language is part of an intellectual movement called the Lost Cause, a distorted version of American Civil War history that's been prevalent in the South for a long time. It took shape soon after the defeat of the Confederate States in the war, when Southern historians like Edward Pollard and former Confederate General Jubal Early started preserving the South's perspective through their writings. They framed the Confederate cause as a heroic defense of the Southern way of life against the overwhelming forces in the North. That narrative has a few basic tenets: the glorification of Confederate soldiers who died for a cause they believed in, the belief that slavery was a benevolent institution, and maybe most importantly, that slavery was not the root cause of the war. The Lost Cause is one of the most notoriously effective efforts to rewrite history, and it was done by the losing side. So how did it become so deeply rooted in Southern memory? Blame the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The UDC was founded in Nashville in 1894 to preserve Confederate culture for generations to come. The women who made up the group descended from elite antebellum families, and they used their social and political clout to spread the pro-Southern version of the war as real history. You've probably seen their efforts to honor the Confederacy, but maybe you didn't know it was the UDC. They're the ones who covered the Southern landscape with memorials for Confederate leaders and soldiers. They used their fundraising and lobbying skills to pressure local governments into erecting monuments in prominent public spaces like courthouses and state capitals.
Installed here next to the state capitol by the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy donated this memorial to the city back in the 30s.
They put them along roadsides and in parks, any place that was remotely relevant to the Confederacy.
So I want to pause there because did y'all catch where they said the Daughters of the Confederacy donated that in the 1930s? That's the height of the Black codes, right? So they were telling their Negroes to get back in their place. Anybody got anything for this? Because you know, I think
They've
sometimes
got little statues. You know, after the word, aren't they the ones responsible for most of those statues of the Confederate heroes being built and erected?
People, when it comes to statues too, people don't even know that many military bases are named after Confederate leaders.
Yes.
You find that out when you just look up the name. You just look up, what is this? They be like John McAdoo or something. You'd be like, who's John? And then you look up, oh, Confederate leader that fought in the Civil War. And I'm like, how come so many people that you guys name everything after is the Confederate leaders? I thought you guys beat them and they were traitors to the country.
It is no different from World War II.
And this will never happen in Germany. Keep going.
Yeah, it's no different from World War II. We were more supportive of Nazis, and to this day still are, than Germany ever was. We brought them here, we got them jobs, but we worked with them all through the war. IBM created the system that made it possible to systematically eliminate as many people as were eliminated through concentration camps. It would have just been too hard, but thanks to the ingenuity of Americans, there was a genocide. This is our bailiwick. This is the wheelhouse of white people in America. And that wasn't a war over slavery in the sense that we didn't want anyone to be oppressed anymore. The priorities were totally different.
With the video that you're showing, Sam,
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm done.
With the video that you were showing, Sam, like a big question I always have is, why is no one ever talking about how, like, because everyone's saying, why is America still like this? Why is no one talking about the fact that in schools they are teaching kids that slavery was good for Black people? Why is that never a thing that gets brought up? Well, and the thing is, there are a lot of people that have been taught that, and yet they never bring it up. They never bring up anything regarding that fact that people are being taught that slavery is good for Black people. Like, you know, they got certain institutions where that is mainly white. Like, there's many schools right now, there's segregation academies that, you know, limit the amount of Black people they want in there and basically just want white people in there. And these still exist because there's a lot of schools in which that were based on, you know, not integrating Black people into, you know, schooling, because white people basically destroyed their public school systems just to keep the Black people out back then when they passed the Brown versus Board of Education policy. So it's no one's talking about that these institutions still exist, and they're based off anti-Blackness, and they're based off, you know, this sort of narrative to preserve their power structures, their way of life, which is inherently anti-Black and white supremacist.
Because he gets the it. He's the Dundada. So anybody got anything before Scorpio?
This is a quick thing about the US Census.
Scorpio unite.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, the US Census, I worked for them last summer.
Okay.
And one of the things that really surprised me going around was how many of the people, I mean, it's 99% white people around here, they have no idea about their background. They don't even know their great grandparents. And they say, well, you know, an ethnic group, they don't know what their name is. And to me, that's strange. They definitely know about
on purpose. They did it on purpose.
Huh? Yeah.
They did it to us on purpose. You're American, you're white, you're not anything else. You're anti-Black. That's all you're supposed to be here. You're not supposed to talk about, I'm, you know, Italian American, I'm, you know, maybe German, maybe if you're Northern European, but really bottom line, I'm here for one purpose only. Where's those Black people at? That's our whole function.
Still, that's weird to me. Yeah.
That's interesting. See, I didn't talk to any white people when I did the census. It was all Latinos for me, Latinos and a few Black people. That was it. That was all. And Latinos don't like having to classify under race. At least not the ones where I am. Let me say Mexicans, because that's the majority of the people that I dealt with. They were Mexicans. They don't like being classified under race. They're not feeling that at all. They don't want to be white. They don't want to be black. They just want to be Mexican. Alrighty then, Scorpio. It's all yours. Bring us home.
You know, with all we saw today, with everything we've witnessed and PETA, I mean, this is not anything new to what we have already been known. Like how we started out with the article, as what one person did not do. We gotta talk about solutions. We gotta talk about things the ways that we can try to solve these problems and actually try to address all this, which this platform has been talking about for a very long time. Reparations and proposals to try to, for one, address the systematic and institutional errors of this system and the failures of this system, which is by design, what they wanted, because it's for their interests and not ours. But that's one thing I'm understanding a lot from all these stories, all these videos, everything. Solutions has to be brought forth. Solutions have to be discussed, because the study did bring forth solutions. And like we saw with the Hudson Square, this is never going to end, because they're not looking for solutions. So when you bring out the problem, they're not going to care about the problem. They're going to probably give you some PR to say, yeah, it sucks, but hey, tomorrow we're going to give you pancakes, and everybody can be directed by the pancakes, while they go back tomorrow telling you that, yeah, man, you have to stay chained up to that cage right there, because you did something that we didn't like, and it could be small, it can be trivial, but they don't care. So unless we start talking about solutions, we ain't gonna solve anything. And that's what a lot of people are doing to this day. And that's one thing that people watching should do at the end. Start thinking about what did people do, or what can we do, instead of like wondering like, oh, this all is happening. It's like, well, yeah, but what can we do to solve it? What is it trying to tell you? Because one thing I got from the article in the beginning, it was like, maybe we can just maybe create our own independent organization and make our own open source with a whole database in it. Because if I saw the money from BLM, I would be like, that money should have been into something where we can build our own database to collect information and police killings and everything. So we don't have to rely on. We don't have to rely on the government. We can rely on what we got over here, and then people can link it. People can reference it, source it, and be like, we don't care if you underreported. We got the resources right here. We got our own independent investigators on the scene, getting the cause of death, and we already working with the families of the victims, and we making sure that this is stored and safe, and y'all can't get rid of it. So anytime somebody looks back at these cases and sees all this, and we got all the information right over here, we already know why this happened. We already know how many of y'all are committing the acts of violence on, people in this country, Black Americans in this country, and other groups of people in this country. It ain't no debate. It ain't no ambiguous language. It's clear, and it's going to be clear, and there's going to be no multiple interpretations to this. It is what it is, and they're going to have to just deal with that.
22. All right. Well, okay. So this is
Ferguson's conspiracy against Black citizens, how the city's leadership harassed and brutalized their way to multiple civil rights violations. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the killing of Michael Brown, many Black residents of Ferguson, Missouri, immediately thought he was the victim of a wrongful death at the hands of police officer Darren Wilson, who shot him after a scuffle. This week, the Department of Justice concluded that there is no evidence to disprove Officer Wilson's claim that he feared for his life during the encounter. And the federal agency also presented context that explains why so many Black residents assumed foul play and took to the streets in protest. For years, Ferguson's police forces meted out brutality, violated civil rights, and helped Ferguson's officials leech off the Black community as shamelessly as would mafia bosses. I'm a little offended by that. So far, a disproportionate amount of press attention has focused on racist emails circulated by Ferguson officials, causing 2 to be fired and 1 to be placed on leave. While the correspondence in question is deeply offensive and worthy of condemnation, it is nowhere close to the most objectionable transgression documented in the DOJ report, which ought to prompt multiple Ferguson officials to resign in disgrace and provoke condemnations from across the political spectrum. Nearly every page shocks the conscience. Ferguson officials repeatedly behaved as if their priority is not improving public safety or protecting the rights of residents, but maximizing the revenue that flows into city coffers, sometimes going so far as to anticipate decreasing sales tax revenues and urging the police force to make up for the shortfall by ticketing more people. Often these tickets...
Let me pause you right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reparations. Hold on, let me... Reparations. This does not happen to people with money. If you pull over the wrong person with money, you might lose your job, or you might be sitting somewhere in a crappy location. Like, these are the things that do not happen to rich kids. At one point I worked at Universal Studios, Hollywood. Like, I had friends who were rich kids. They were Hollywood kids. Like, no, these things don't happen in these neighborhoods and in these communities. This happens to poor people. Only poor people are allowed to be preyed upon. This is basically saying that they were preying upon the citizens of this town. Imagine that. Imagine that you are the revenue stream for another town. It's wild.
It's shocking. But you know what? It's also everywhere. We have, so South Shore is a neighborhood in Chicago, predominantly Black neighborhood on the South Side. And people were getting tickets for years and didn't understand what they were for. Like, they would park, they would come home, they would park, they'd have a ticket. They'd contest it, they'd lose. And it was just like confusion until this young man, really, really smart young man, started just tracking all of the people who got the tickets and figured out, you know, when you drive, and it doesn't always make sense to you, but you'll see, like, on a normal residential street, there's one of those no parking signs that's like, don't park from here to the corner. And it's probably like, you know, they want visibility at the corner, or they just don't want, for whatever reason, there'll be a little piece of the street you're not supposed to park on. They were using that law, but didn't have those signs up in the neighborhood. The data that he collected in terms of the disproportionate amount of revenue that was coming out of South Shore compared to the rest of the city, and he did it but like neighborhood by neighborhood, was shocking. Of course, he got on TV. There was like an article in the free paper and stuff like that. What they did was add those signs, but they're still ticketing the hell out of everyone. It's just, you know, reparations, right? They would not have done that. The signs would have been up in the first place, but they sure as hell wouldn't have been just ticketing you randomly and thinking they didn't have to explain themselves. And even the judges were like, I don't know what you did, but you're guilty.
I did hear, generally speaking, about what was going down in Ferguson, but specifically that, no.
So you got the outline, but you didn't get like the full details of like how they were literally like preying on the citizens.
Right. And yeah, I got the outline, and I was following Chuck Moji when he was there.
Okay, I remember him. Yeah, he's good on Twitter. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I see, Bones. I see that you sent that video. There's multiple videos I saw where like this Black kid is jogging, and then this officer stops him, and then he's like, am I being detained or whatever? And the officer is pressuring him to abide by his demand. I know people would say that you have to listen to the officer, and I look at them and say, so you're telling me that I have to listen to this person or I die? I hope you understand with that, like, because people talk about authoritarianism in other countries and whatnot, but I look at them and say, you're telling me I have to listen to this police officer or he kills me. I hope they understand how like terrible that really sounds and feels. Like, if you don't listen to this officer, you caused your own death. Like, you didn't deserve to be treated with any respect or any humanity. There's even like other videos where you have two black men sitting in a car and it's a rental and the officer comes and stops them. And then like the officer asks him, so is that your keys there? And he's like, yeah, I just start the ignition. That's how I just drive the car. Then the officer takes the car keys and puts it on top of the vehicle so he can't drive if anything happens to him. Then he's saying like, your friend's looking at me weird and I smell marijuana in the car. Like they literally stop people at gas stations to say, I smell marijuana in the car, I have to go and tow your vehicle. But that means the person can't even get home because you basically towed their vehicle. Like there's so many things that,
and that comes at a cost. And as a poor person, that's a tax. Keep going. I'm sorry.
It never stops, because even another situation where this guy was taking care of this special needs person, and they was running around and the person was trying to keep them calm, and the police showed up and the guy was on the floor with his hands up and they shot him in the thigh. And then he asked the officer, why you shoot me? And he was like, officer, I don't know. And I'm just thinking, he had his hands up on the floor and there was no reason to shoot him. He was not a threat. He didn't do anything. He didn't resist or nothing, but he still got shot. Or people getting stopped for traffic violations that they used to search your vehicle and whatnot, like, or someone like that's moving around saying, why are you moving? Like, what were you doing? Like every time, in many cases on camera. And the thing is, many officers, like, because I know people talk about body cams, but sometimes you stop the body cams. Many times we hear that the body cam wasn't even on. And you ask yourself, why is the body cam not even on? Even in my area, like apparently they had like 30 or something, 60 body cams for over 1,000 officers. So that means if you were to have something happen to you, they would not catch that because they don't have much body cams anyway. There's not much for them for the body cams anyway. And they would turn it off, or they would like not even try to show the footage, and they would try to like edit the footage. Like there's so many things, there's so many processes that goes through when you look at these cases. Like the only thing that you can do as a person is record it, because that's basically you trying to protect yourself legally from being like lied about and having someone trying to make up stories about you, because they're an authority. They have the authority to make up lies and be believed because they're officers, and people believe that officers are inherently trying to protect the community despite the evidence of them actually terrorizing the community. So like, and there's another situation where this guy was at school and like doing his work study, picking up trash around, and this officer came around and he was like, hey man, can you give me your ID and whatnot? And then he was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? He's like, where your dorm at? And he was like, what do you mean where my dorm is at? I don't have to give you that information. And then the officer brought all these other officers. They surrounded him and they said like, you're armed. Is like, I'm not armed. This is just a tool for picking up trash. And then he was like, what do you mean be calm? You guys are all surrounding me. You guys all have guns. You can kill me right now. Like, y'all can literally kill me. And it took for a white college professor to show up for them to take him seriously, that he actually was a part of the dorm. Like he was a part of the college. This happens constantly. Another situation where they had a officer from New York who was seemingly off duty, and this was related back to the previous conversation, where he went into this black woman's home, broke into her home. He was drunk, and then he basically says, he threatens her, saying he would like snap her neck and called her the N-word with a hard ER, like everything. And then she recorded it and got it on like camera and audio recording, and they went to court, and he was like, he pleaded no case or something, like it was something. And then she was like, we got it on audio, like you can't just act as if you didn't do this and didn't say this, and then they was asking, what is this person doing to the police if they're saying this to me? This happened last year. There's a lot of cases where like a black woman got killed by an officer that went into the home, and I think like they didn't even know it was not even his home or something. Like this happens too often. Even when like back then, even on white people, there was one situation with a white kid where they investigated him like for years, saying that he killed this old woman, when like all he did was walk to school one day and he saw a body and he thought it was a mannequin, and then he went to school and they went to his room, they did all this to him, but like they never actually investigated the case of the woman that died because he was at home and he was like just a teenager. And when he went to the military or something, they literally were still investigating him, and the only reason they was investigating him was so they can get somebody like convicted, because they wanted to tell the public like, oh no, we're doing our jobs, but they're not doing their jobs.
That's wild. Yeah, I don't even know what the percentage of murders that go unsolved are, but I feel like they spend more time on the drug stuff because they have to show win somewhere, and that's low hanging.
Yep. This is constant. This happens all the time. because the police are just people, like they're just in the interest of those who have power. Like they're not in the interest of us, and that's the big problem right there. Like they're not here to protect us. I don't really believe the police is, at least to me, here to protect and serve, because like what exactly is this doing to make sure that I'm safe and that my friends are safe? That's doing to make sure that we're safe. Like how is this over here? Like there's like Bantu point out before. Bantu always points this out. White collar crime is like one of the biggest crimes that this country commits, and the officers don't do nothing about that.
It's the opposite of them not being here to protect your family and my family. They're here to the extent that you have Black folks in your family, or to basically they're here to prosecute and hunt down and engage in violence, like, and terrorize our communities. That's what they're here. That's their function. It's not just, I mean, you just look at the pattern, like the things you were just describing, with the exception of the one kind of unusual case at the end, and it happens everywhere, all over the country. They're not accidentally or because of individual prejudice doing bad things to Black people. That's what they get up in the morning and put their uniforms on to do. That's the function, the purpose they are serving, to terrorize a quarter of our country and to keep people oppressed. And really, to do worse than that. We talked about 17,000 misclassified deaths, overwhelmingly Black folks.
There's probably
Overwhelmingly
even more because the open sources didn't even
I'm sure you're
go
right.
that far. There's probably even more that we don't even, that's probably wasn't even know this. Like imagine the 1930s, how much they was neglecting that as well. Like it's just so much.
Yep.
It's probably even more, and this is the like limits that it can like just get at the moment. But if people were to go back and find more, and that's hidden and not talked about, because there's a situation with John F. Kennedy, where they were talking about Operation Northwood, where basically this is a whole operation where they wanted to bomb themselves to enact war on Cuba, and this is what people use as a precursor to 9/11. Like, and not necessarily that they said they did 9/11, but it's more of like it's possible that they can do this to themselves because they literally talked about it 40 years prior. Like all classified. It was very shocking because this is a now public thing to say Operation Northwood. JFK was like, no, we ain't gonna do that. And it was like, what you mean? Like we're not gonna commit a terrorist attack on ourselves and blame it on people who didn't do it. Like that's crazy.
Operation what? One more time. Just
Northwood. Operation Northwood.
Northwood. Okay. So
Yeah.
people can look it up. Whew, all right. Oh, we still got to go back to the article. Whew.
Yep.
Go ahead, Gabriel. You got to unmute yourself. I know Scorpio will be burning down the house, and then you just want to start going. Go ahead.
The richness, Sam, it's like an abundance that you've organized here.
So I'm gonna edit this out, but I've already.
Okay, you want me to keep reading?
Yes, let me pull it back up so the rest of us can read along.
Recent officials repeatedly behaved as if their priority is not improving public safety or protecting the rights of residents, but maximizing the revenue that flows into city coffers, sometimes going so far as to anticipate decreasing sales tax revenues and urging the police force to make up for the shortfall by ticketing more people. Often, those tickets for minor offenses then turned into arrest warrants. Police officers were judged not only on the number of stops they made, but on the number of citations they issued. Officers routinely conduct stops that have little relation to public safety and a questionable basis in law, the report states. Issuing 3 or 4 charges in one stop is not uncommon. Officers sometimes write 6, 8, or in at least one instance, 14 citations for a single encounter.
Where you going? That's just a wow. Think about that. Think about you're a poor person. You don't have enough gas in your car to get to work, and you got to figure out how to pay 6 to
rent. This is like the cost of rent or something. That's a lot of citations.
And if you pay this citation, now you no longer have a roof over your head. So what happens when you don't pay this citation? You get a warrant. What happens? Now you're dodging the police. So when you see the police, you run, even if you didn't do shit. Go ahead.
Right. And then you get shot. Some officers compete to see who can issue the most citations in a single stop. Capitalism at its finest. In one email, the police chief, who also oversees the municipal court, brags to the city manager about how much revenue it is generating. Ignoring that conflict of interest is a recipe for a justice system that bleeds the powerless of their meager resources. Ferguson's municipal court judge, Ronald Brockmeyer, who was appointed by the city council, is well aware that his job performance is evaluated partly on how much revenue he generates from the bench. One 2011 internal report in Ferguson notes that Judge Brockmeyer made a list of what he has done to help in the areas of court efficiency and revenue. The next year, a city council member suggested that he should not be reappointed, arguing that he does not listen to the testimony, does not review the reports or the criminal history of defendants, and doesn't let all the pertinent witnesses testify before rendering a verdict. If you think those shortcomings disqualified him, think again. The report continues. The council member then addressed the concern that switching judges would/could lead to loss of revenue, arguing that even if such a switch did lead to a slight loss, I think it's more important that cases are being handled properly and fairly. The city manager acknowledged mixed reviews of Judge Brockmeyer's work, but urged that the judge be reappointed, noting that it goes without saying the city cannot afford to lose any efficiency in our courts, nor experience any decrease in our fines and forfeitures. Establishing these glaring perverse incentives, effectively compromising the city's criminal justice system to increase revenue, is enough to disgrace Ferguson's leaders all on its own, whether one regards them as civic imbeciles or moral cretins. But the consequences of these misdeeds and other transgressions against residents can only be fully understood with stories of Ferguson's many victims. While I recommend reading the whole DOJ report, I'd gladly see it assigned to every high school or college student and state legislator in America. I'll focus the rest of this post on those stories and a few other particularly alarming findings. As you read on, keep in mind that this is but a selection of horrors from the DOJ report, which describes a tiny selection of all police misconduct stories in Ferguson. One passage describes the way that Ferguson officials have criminalized being too poor to pay a ticket. In 2013 alone, the court issued over 9,000 warrants on cases stemming in large part from minor violations such as parking infractions, traffic tickets, or housing code violations. Jail time would be considered far too harsh a penalty for the great majority of these code violations, yet Ferguson's municipal court routinely issues warrants for people to be arrested and incarcerated for failing to timely pay related fines and fees. Under state law, a failure to appear in municipal court on a traffic charge involving a moving violation results in a license suspension. Ferguson has made this penalty more onerous by only allowing the suspensions to be lifted after payment of an owed fine is made in full. Here's how Ferguson officials wreak havoc on people's lives over the tiniest of infractions. We spoke with an African-American woman who has a still pending case stemming from 2007 when on a single occasion she parked her car illegally. She received 2 citations and a $151 fine plus fees. The woman, who experienced financial difficulties and periods of homelessness over several years, was charged with 7 failure to appear offenses for missing court dates or fine payments on her parking tickets between 2007 and 2010. For each failure to appear, the court issued an arrest warrant and imposed new fines and fees.
Can we pause right there?
Yeah.
I just want us to have a moment and just talk about this. I need us to just really talk about this. How do you get out of this kind of debt when you don't have any money? You can't call anybody to help you. There is no help. You can't pick up extra hours. You can barely afford to feed your family. How do you survive like this?
This is where the disparate resources that we talk about is so critical, because, you know, when you think about that $8 that is the median net worth of a Black person in Boston, so much of that money has been spent on family members and friends who are in exactly this kind of problem. It's not just that you can't raise enough money. You know, it's not like you're working and you're saving, but it's not just that you don't have assets. It's that what you earn, you're in a web of people who are prosecuted just like this all the time. It's one bill after the next, and disproportionately, whatever kind of scenario you come up with, Black folks are targeted, and it's as much wealth as we can. So you start to do a little bit okay. You're here. You're doing all right. You got a little money in the bank, but your brother needs some help with the rent. and your uncle needs some help because he's going into some program, school or something like that. And so you're giving here and you're giving there, and now you don't have resources. And like you said, Sam, the day comes when you look around and no one's got any. Everyone's been given when they could, but there's just not enough to go around.
Whew, y'all got anything? Anybody else?
Well, you also lose your job that you do have because you have transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a vicious, driving you right down into the ground. So that they can have more money, income.
But not to fix the streets or anything, to pay themselves, go to conventions, things like that.
Like that. Go ahead, Scorpio. I know you had something.
I just it's just crazy that that people aren't really thinking about the circumstances in which, because they're always talking about the person that's being victimized and never talking about the person that's doing the antagonism, because they always tell the victimized that you got to do this, you got to do that, but it's like, as you said, like, how do you get out of this without any money? It's like somebody telling me like, hey, like, I watch a YouTube video and they say, hey, this is how you can make your own cake. And I'm like, well, I don't even have the oven to make the cake. I don't even have the pan to make the cake. All I got is, I guess, my hands, but there's nothing I can use my hands with. So I cannot make the cake. And he was like, you just have to try. And I'm like, try what? Like, I would think to myself, I'm a 12-year-old boy and my family don't got much. So I guess I'll just not do it. It's like, when people say you don't even have any boots, how can you put yourself by the bootstraps when you don't have any boots in the first place?
Oh dear. May seem obvious, but I personally don't feel that anyone should be starving or struggling in this world today. Like, I turned around one day and it was one of those, we saw one earlier, there was a, you can adopt a child and send them 24 days, $24 a month and change their lives. And what about here? There's just no reason to allow this anymore.
You sound like a socialist, Patricia.
Yeah, I kind of do. But it's not a system that is stable, that people can rely on. And why should people be ground into the ground for, hate and prejudice and just to maintain control all over the money of the world? It's, So anyway, I saw this commercial on TV. It was like 20 years ago. And I turned around and I went, that's dumb. Why are they asking for money to donate? It's a structural problem. Just donating money, I mean, it helps, but it's a Band-Aid. And then billionaires say, oh, well, they donate money and they do good works. Well, on the other hand, they're causing pain and suffering and poisoning us. Don't want to work on the climate change problems. Don't want to listen to Black Americans. It's absurd.
No, it is. Anand Gerdes has a good book about that. Winner Takes All, where he talks about that, how they whitewash their terrible records through charity. We'll have to do a whole episode on that, because that's stuff that we haven't talked about on Reset Race that I would love to get into, because I'm a nerd. I'm all over the place. I watch everything. I read everything. But yeah, oh my goodness. Do we have anything else before we go back into the rest of just reading this article?
For each failure to appear, the court issued an arrest warrant and imposed new fines and fees. From 2007 to 2014, the woman was arrested twice, spent 6 days in jail, and paid $550 to the courts for the events stemming from this single instance of illegal parking. Court records show that she twice attempted to make partial payments of $25 and $50, but the court returned those payments, refusing to accept anything less than payment in full. One of those payments was later accepted, but only after the court's letter rejecting payment by money order was returned as undeliverable. This woman is now making regular payments on the fine. As of December 2014, over 7 years later, despite initially owing a $151 fine and having already paid $550, she still owes $541. Older folks face an extra burden, but seem to get no slack. A 90-year-old man had a warrant issued for his arrest after he failed to timely pay the 5 citations FPD issued to him during a single traffic stop in 2013. An 83-year-old man had a warrant issued against him when he failed to timely resolve his derelict auto violation. A 67-year-old woman told us she was stopped and arrested by a Ferguson police officer for an outstanding warrant for failure to pay a trash removal citation. She did not know about the warrant until her arrest, and the court ultimately charged her $1,000 in fines, which she paid in $100 monthly increments, despite being on a limited fixed income. We have heard similar stories from dozens of other individuals and have reviewed court records documenting many additional instances of similarly harsh penalties, often for relatively minor violations. Here's an incident that caused a Ferguson resident to lose a job he had held for years. In the summer of 2012, a 32-year-old African-American man sat in his car cooling off after playing basketball in a Ferguson public park. An officer pulled up behind the man's car and demanded the man's social security number and identification. Without any cause, the officer accused the man of being a pedophile, referring to the presence of children in the park, and ordered the man out of his car for a pat-down, although the officer had no reason to believe the man was armed. The officer also asked to search the man's car. The man objected, citing his constitutional rights. In response, the officer arrested the man, reportedly at gunpoint, charging him with 8 violations of Ferguson's municipal code. One charge, making a false declaration, was for initially providing the short form of his first name, Mike, e.g. Mike instead of Michael, and an address which, although legitimate, was different from the one on his driver's license. Another charge was for not wearing a seatbelt, even though he was seated in a parked car. The officer also charged the man both with having an expired operator's license and with having no operator's license in his possession. I want to pause here and just point out that it's super frustrating to me that I don't know, although I know the demographics of Ferguson, I think it would just be nice if they were pointing out who of these people are Black and who aren't. Because I think it's a different story.
Yeah.
If you don't make that clear. I think we know who these people are, but not everyone does. And people will say like, oh, it could be anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll continue unless someone else wants to say something.
Y'all got anything? Has anybody got anything, or can we keep going?
Okay. Here's a small part of the evidence that the city is racially biased against Black residents. Thank you. It's like they heard me. With respect to speeding charges brought by FPD, the evidence shows not only that African Americans are represented at disproportionately high rates overall, but also that the disparate impact of the FPD's enforcement practices on African Americans is 48% larger when citations are issued not on the basis of radar or laser, but by some other method, such as the officer's own visual assessment. These disparities are also present in FPD's use of force. Nearly 90% of documented force used by FPD officers was used against African Americans. I feel like we just get so used to these sentences, we hear them. Nearly 90% of documented force used by FPD officers was against African Americans. What in the world? In every canine bite incident for which racial information is available, the person bitten was African American. Are they talking about police dogs, Sam?
I think so. So we're still in the 1960s.
Jesus. African Americans are 68% less likely than others to have their cases dismissed by the court and are more likely to have their cases last longer and result in more required court encounters. African Americans are at least 50% more likely to have their cases lead to an arrest warrant and account for 92% of cases in which an arrest warrant was issued by the Ferguson Municipal Court in 2013. Available data show that of those actually arrested by FPD only because of an outstanding municipal warrant, 96% are African American. Our investigation indicates that this disproportionate burden on African Americans cannot be explained by any difference in the rate at which people of different races violate the law. No kidding. Rather, our investigation has revealed that these disparities occur, at least in part, because of unlawful bias against and stereotypes about African Americans. We have found substantial evidence of racial bias among police and court staff in Ferguson. For example, we discovered emails circulated by police supervisors and court staff that stereotype racial minorities as criminals, including one email that joked about an abortion by an African American woman being a means of crime control. Here's an occasion when the Ferguson Police Department violated the Fourth Amendment. In July 2013, police encountered an African American man in a parking lot while on their way to arrest someone else at an apartment building. Police knew that the encountered man was not the person they had come to arrest. Nonetheless, without even reasonable suspicion, they handcuffed the man, placed him in the back of a police car, and ran his record. It turned out he was the intended arrestee's landlord. The landlord went on to help the police enter the person's unit to effect the arrest, but he later filed a complaint alleging racial discrimination and unlawful detention. Ignoring the central fact that they had handcuffed a man and put him in a police car despite having no reason to believe he had done anything wrong, a sergeant vigorously defended FPD's actions, characterizing the detention as minimal and pointing out that the car was air conditioned. This is just heartbreaking. I don't want to talk about, there's an example I want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about it now. But I think I just want to say first that the number of them is unbelievable, but sadly, this is a minor, this kind of abuse in terms of how it impacts people, as bad as it is not the worst stuff that happens. But the pattern it represents is, I think, representative of things that happen all over the country. And it's just routine, and we just accept it.
That's
makes for a good Islamic art, right? And then that's it.
No, it's a lot, right? Like you said, it takes a lot to reproduce this system. Well, I don't even think you'll still be able to see me because of the light. So, but it just takes a lot to reproduce this system, right? Like it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like all of us have to play a part in it for it to keep continuing because we have to ignore it, right?
Right.
So I want to play this video. At any point we can say stop. And after that, we'll do final thoughts and I'll let everybody go. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week at our adjusted time just for this week, which will be 12 Eastern for next Sunday.
You're getting up at 9?
I'm always up. I get up early.
Oh.
My puppies get up around 5:30. So that's around the time my day starts. Yeah. Crazy, right? All right, here we go. I'm gonna play this for us. Oh, let me turn on the sound. That would be good too.
There's a kind of a fundamental basis for post-traumatic slave syndrome. How many of you are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder? Okay, so these are things, I mean, most of you are people who are in the field that have done the work. You're here representing the people who are really in the trenches, and I appreciate and respect that. The theory very often, when people hear it, post-traumatic slave syndrome, I try to kind of get at kind of what's going on in the room. There's ambivalence, there's feelings of, you know, what? Come on now. What are we saying now about the slavery thing? It's over. You know, get over it. You know, we're done. We have that kind of feeling. And how possibly is she drawing a connection between something that happened so long ago and contemporary society? You know, come on, are you trying to find an excuse? Are you trying to blame people? You know, these are the natural kind of knee-jerk reactions to hearing the term post-traumatic slave syndrome. However, I would submit to you that, you know, it's based on research. So I did about 6 years of research specifically looking at violence. My area of focus is violence, and I'll cover that in my my PowerPoint. Also, some of you may not be able to see points of the PowerPoint, but we're going to make it available to you, so you don't have to worry about it. There's a website where you'll be able to download my PowerPoint. Isn't that correct? Did I say that right? Okay, so that part you don't have to worry about. But I kind of want to set the ground so that we can all advance and move forward together. Now, the reason I do that, and the reason why I began that way, is because there's an assumption, a fundamental assumption, in a room this size with people very well educated, people very well exposed, that we're all entering this discussion at the same level. And we are not. I can guarantee you we are not. We all have our ideas and our beliefs, and then we all have our experience. For example, the people of color that are in the room, all the people of color that are in this room are arriving in this room at a different level because they have lived in this skin. And we're rarely given any kind of appreciation or understanding of what you have to live with walking through the world with this skin. So you kind of come in at a different level of awareness about the discussion. And then you have folks that come into this discussion that are educated around it, that are clear about it, but can't really empathize their way through it. In other words, it's not a feeling thing, it's a cerebral thing. So some people stay intellectual because that's a level of comfort, nothing wrong with that. But very different from the person who lives in the skin. It is personal and it is emotional. Okay, so all of that's going on in this room even before we get started. But as people committed, you know, it may get a bit uncomfortable. But that's okay, because it's been uncomfortable living in this skin. It's been uncomfortable. And we have to learn how to deal with that discomfort and stay in the room. So when we look at the fundamental premise of trauma, and we understand the nature of trauma, we know that there have been other groups that we've looked at the etiology of contemporary behavior based on multi-generational trauma. One group, Jewish Holocaust, families of Jewish Holocaust, and the fact that the Jewish community is very, very clear about honoring that Holocaust. So much so that Spielberg will probably make another movie. And I'm not mad at him, because what he's doing is ensuring that the generations that come will never forget the Holocaust and its impact upon Jewish people. You'll look at folks throughout the world, even Aboriginal folks in the United States, where more focus is being done on what colonialism has done. We've looked at Japanese internment. We've looked at Australian Aboriginal folks. We've looked at multi-generational impact of trauma on people who have had tragedies like the tsunami victims. We'll look at everybody, but when it comes to looking at Africans, there's a visceral response. Oh, come on, let's not, why are you? And it's a curious thing as a social scientist to me that you get so much pushback when you talk about Africa. And we look at the legacy of slavery. You get so much pushback, but more importantly is why do you get the pushback? See, as a social scientist, I'm less concerned with the material, which I'm clear about. I'm more interested in why the behavior. Why is there such reticence at looking at this issue? And the answer is, when you peel back the layers of this, we peel back everybody's layers. Everyone gets naked in this room, and that's not always comfortable. It's also very comfortable to talk about the other's pathology. And the reason why I think that becomes important is so that when we begin to engage in this discussion, we don't find ourselves falling victim to the fear, guilt, all of that stuff that's not useful to anyone. It's not useful. This means we're going to peel the layers back. And while 246 years, as it were, in American history of American chattel slavery, starting with 1619 to the ratification of the 13th Amendment in the United States, we're looking at 246 years of American chattel slavery. And it's very comfortable, and I think to some degree people can say, you can't have 246 years of trauma and expect that nothing happened, especially when that trauma was followed by more.
And let's just call the trauma what it was. It was a genocide. Like, I just want to put it in context. That was the first one. I'm gonna keep playing a little bit more. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm playing the wrong video, y'all. Oh, I'm so glad I double checked. See, stuff be bouncing on me.
I liked what she said. When we peel back these layers, we peel back everybody's layers. Because I think that's a lot of times these conversations are like people are defensive, you know, they hide and don't want to talk about how we're complicit. You know, you don't face history until you can place yourself in it.
That's true, because and that's true because I didn't like history when I was in school because, you know, they feed you a bunch of stuff you don't care about. But as soon as I got out of, as soon as I started reading as an adult and started getting into, really getting into it, man, when I tell you I learned.
I feel like a lot of public schools is like an indoctrination method for a lot of white people, because this stuff, because I think looking back when I was a kid, it's insulting that, because my father, he was born in Jamaica, but he came here and he told me, and he was telling me who's the first US president of the United States. And I look back at him as an adult, you really wanted me to know who the first president of the United States was, it was a white man who owned black people. I hope, it just, to me, is why should I feel proud that I know a slave master? I looked at him what have you taught me any person, a president or prime minister of Jamaica? And he didn't have anything to say. It was I wish I knew that before I knew the first president of the United States. Because they make you celebrate people who just didn't like you. If they was alive today, they will look at you why is the N-word in, schools? Why are they near white children, right? People neglect that fact. People neglect that reality. I just feel like it's an indoctrination method for many white folks. You're muted.
I said, does anybody have any? I said, that was really good. I said, does anybody have anything else? So if not, I'll share. I actually found the video because it's on the Reset Race page that I wanted to use. But I guess it was good because she really did a good explanation, right? So everything happens for a reason, right? Anybody got anything? Bantu, you got anything? All right.
I think to myself, if I were up here in front of you right now, and this is going to become very important as I move into the other slides. If I stomped a puppy to death up here, just a little puppy, and stomped it right here to death in front of you, most of you would need therapy. And I would be arrested probably faster than killing a black man for killing a puppy. Now, I want you to look at this photo very closely, and I want you to see who's in it. More important than the man hanging, because you got to understand the lynchings that occurred in America happened after slavery. Not during. Thousands of lynchings happened after slavery because this is a reaction to white fear of what we would do once freed. But we didn't create a vigilante group to take out white people, but they did create a vigilante group to take us out now that we're free. See, that happened after slavery. They were called the what? The Ku Klux Klan. They don't wear hoodies.
It's just the conditioning of this country just to make people not care. And I just want to take a moment to kind of go, I don't want to go super deep, but I went through this in the Humanist Report, and I think I'll probably just throw it in there about the conditioning, but they conditioned you to be this way. They would tar and feather white people who wanted to, if this was 100 years ago, Gabe, Sinead, Patricia, they would be killed for doing this. They would be killed, or if not beaten, all kinds of things could happen to their family just 100 years ago. Shit, let's not even go 100 years ago, 1960s. So we need to really start understanding what this is so we can kind of move forward. I'm gonna put in the video because I think I actually did a really good job of explaining it in there. And I don't want to take up too much time because I want to actually keep getting through the video. Do we have anything else, or should I keep going through the video, guys? Oh no, Scorpio, you had something, right? Please go.
It's the Super Bowl commercial in which they basically during the commercial they used BLM imagery to talk about animal rights. It was like PETA, and many people were offended. This happened in 2020, so it's about to be 2 years since this commercial, and people were not having it. They were not having it because they did the knee, the animals did the knee. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I was saying, could you remember to send that to me? Because I want to make sure that that is in the video.
I'll send it.
Thank
it's
you.
A very short, like, commercial, and people were insulted. That's really what I had to say when you say that they care more about their dogs than they do care about black people. That's been the thing throughout history. People care more about the dogs. Everyone has humanity and empathy for like dogs and everybody else before they even promote rights for black folks. Because that apparently black people don't deserve anything, and if they are asking for reparative justice, then they're trying to get handouts for labor that they like, because everyone talks about hard work in this country, but in reality, like, this country was built by people who really exploited others. Like, they didn't have to work so hard because the people they exploited were working hard for them, because if they didn't, they would die.
Yes, they stole our earned inheritance. Go ahead.
That's how I had to say.
Okay, I'm gonna get back to this video then.
This little girl is not disturbed by this. But she should be, shouldn't she? People always ask me and go, Joy, what was the impact on white people? There it is. Right there. Can't feel any empathy for him. None, zero, zip. There's a little one back here, even smaller. Because whatever she's been taught or told, socialized to believe, makes him no longer human. That's the greatest danger to white people, is that they can't feel it. And there's a reason why white people can't feel what we're talking about. My God, what would you then feel? It's tough. So I've got to believe, oh, it's all over now. It's not my fault. I don't benefit. It's not a big deal. Let's move on. It's not all of those things. But we don't say that to Jewish people. I dare you. But you have to understand.
I'm not going to get super deep into that, but you saw what happened when Bree just told a Jewish woman that she should try to de-radicalize Nazis. She didn't even go full over the line. Well, she went over the line, but you understand, she didn't go the way they come at black people.
Right.
And you saw the type of heat she took. So I'm gonna keep going because I don't want to get super deep in it, but I just wanted to point that out because she's making a point right there. Like, it's you only do this to black folk.
Understand, when you unearth this one, that's what we did to our children. Let's move forward. This is a similar photo to the one that is used in Denzel's movie. Now, and again, most important, this is a man that's being burned. Also, I won't read the depiction, but there are newspaper accounts of this. It's written in a book called 100 Years of Lynching by Ginsburg. No pictures, just newspapers that say not only did they burn him, they decapitated him, cut him into pieces, and used parts of his body as things to put on mantles. So people would say, get me a tongue, would you, or a liver, a little crisp, so I could put it on the mantle. Now, again, I want you to look at the folks. I want you to look at who's here. We're not talking about the toothless, big gut, hooded wonder, are we? We're looking at plain old, common, dressed up folks. They're squeezing, please, I want my picture taken. Are you following me? This is somebody's cousin, uncle, somebody.
These people are.
And the ability to do that, dehumanize this man and rob them of their humanity all at the same time. All at the same time. That is the most dangerous, treacherous thing that could happen. What did Hitler do?
Sorry, I want to take a moment. I got something for you. Hold on. I keep seeing this meme going around on Twitter where they're talking about, like, of course, the grandbabies of, the people who did this, like yelling at the girl, trying to go into school, don't want them to learn CRT. Let's go further. These people saw what the Jews did to the Nazis, and they know if the tide changes, their old asses are going to jail because a lot of these people are alive right now. Why aren't we doing facial recognition software? Why aren't we going and looking these people up? There's a picture right now on Twitter. I'll have to try to remember to go and get it. There's a 100-year-old man, a 100-year-old Nazi that they are trying. He's Walker 100 folded over. Try it. Let's rock. This is America. Murder, statutes for murder forever. Let's go. Where's some justice? These people's families are alive right now. These people who did this are alive right now. This is why we can't talk about critical race theory. This is why we can't talk about white fragility. This is why we can't talk about any of these things. Because when we do, the real outcome is we got to follow the law. The same way if I go and kill, if I go find Patricia and kill her, and I get away for 20 years and they find me, they gonna lock my ass up. It's not gonna matter that Sam's 60 going on 70. Murder's murder. I'm sorry. Nobody cares about the old Nazis that they drudge up when they're 100 years old, 90 years old. Nobody says that happened 70 years ago, 80 years ago. No, they put their ass on fucking trial. Let's go, Carol Bryant. Let's dust this bitch up. That's the one who lied on Emmett Till. Let's rock. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I had a moment. I don't really like to go hard on the people, but I'm not going hard on white people, but I'm going hard on the murderers. Some people are descendants of murderers, and those same people are racist, evil people still.
Bantu wants to chime in, it looks like.
Please do.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, I agree with you when you say, like, looking into these old cases, or even, like, putting a lot of cases that wasn't, like, written down on the books, because, you know, they just was talking about how they found the Zodiac killer. So it's like, invest that same type of, like, research into,
I
like,
didn't know that. Oh, shit.
Yeah, you didn't know that? Yeah,
No.
they just was talking about that all over the internet, about them finding the Zodiac killer. So it's like, if y'all can find the Zodiac killer,
yeah,
it was some old dude who died long, like I think back in the 80s or something like that.
Ah, shit.
Hold on, let
I
me
would have loved for
link
them
the
to
article
throw
in
his
here.
ass into jail so we could prove a point. Go ahead, Bantu.
Oh, that was it. That was all I was saying. Like, if y'all can find the Zodiac killer, then we know that the information and research is out there for y'all to also dig in these old cold cases of lynchings and, you know, all other types of white terror, you know, that occurred throughout the history. So, you know, like, to me, I know the research is out there. I know they have methods out there to, like, look into this. You know what I mean? I'm just backing up what you were saying.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure people got these postcards. Y'all know who your grandparents are. Quit fucking with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know who Mima is.
They might got books and records and memorabilia of, like, body parts and stuff that they didn't took from these lynchings and stuff like that. If you look deep into their houses and whatnot, you never know what you might find, because you also hear stories about that when it comes to Nat Turner and after the rebellion, how they really auctioned off parts and pieces of the Nat Turner and sold them after they lynched them. You know what I mean? So I know there's probably a lot of, like, old, like, households and little storages that's probably filled with all kinds of memorabilia and whatnot, you know, their previous terrorist years and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Some dude. Here we go. I'm about to link the article right here.
Please do. So the good thing about us dropping all this stuff is in the chat is I could just copy and paste all this stuff into the description box. So we have a lot of links. So for those of y'all who really want to go through this stuff, y'all gonna have fun because it's a lot of links.
Dehumanized human beings, put babies in ovens. Anything that robs us of our humanity is a danger to everyone. And that is what's going on with people of African descent all over the world, because not only did it get done here, but who did we tell the entire world we told these people don't deserve any value? Everyone wants to be American, not y'all.
15,000.
But when we go, I literally go to countries all over the world. America sets the standard, and thank God for what happened later. Let's move forward. So a lot of people start saying, well, y'all got free, right? Y'all are free, everything's fine. See, whenever you talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome, people get locked there. So there's a myth that after slavery ended, the playing field was leveled. Was it? Remember, all the lynchings occurred after slavery. That wasn't during, after slavery. So you had black sharecropping. Now, we didn't get a lot of black history in our schooling. I have 4 degrees, and 3 of them advanced degrees. Never did I get black history. I got about 2 pages of black history, and one page was a picture. And there was a picture of the little folks with the cabin. You probably saw the same picture. It's a little cabin.
I didn't even get a cabin.
The little guy on the porch with the banjo. Little children running, frolicking about, eating watermelon, right?
Can I just take this moment to be honest? I do not remember learning about slavery in school. I do not remember learning about slavery in school. Okay, I was gonna say that.
Everybody happy? And we certainly need little Mary and little Johnny to believe that they were happy. The slaves were happy people. And they had a nice place to live. Because we couldn't have them feeling cognitive what? Not little Mary. She can't start questioning what Grandpa did. So I want you to see this because those are leftover slave quarters. He's a sharecropper. So now let's go back and take a look at sharecropping. Now these are folks that were slaves, no longer slaves.
Lineage tape.
Decided I'm going back to be a sharecropper on the same plantation that I was enslaved. Why would you do that? You all heard about Katrina, yes? Yeah. See, I was there. My family's from Louisiana. I went to the 9th Ward. Sometimes you can't pay attention to what the news says. It's important to actually go eyeball what's going on, which was very interesting because it was one of the most horrific events I'd ever seen and probably will ever see in my life. Well, black folks were just simply treated differently. Did you notice that? Here's the good news about Katrina. Everybody noticed it. So all the rest of the world where we learned, send us your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, your democracy, your equality. They said, what happened with that Katrina thing? All that stuff y'all talked about. Well, let me read this. This is from Associated Press, taken straight from the newspaper. In the front, actually, the top part here is actually a woman, but they think it's a man. Anyway, it says, a young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday, August 30th, 2005. Same body of water down here, excuse me. 2 residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store. Now, same event, same water. White people, black people. We've told you what you see now. That removes your what? Dissonance, because these people can't be perceived as looting. They're white people. White people don't loot. Now, the truth of the matter is, I don't care what any of them are doing. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to still the social conscience by letting you know, don't forget, this is a looter. Matter of fact, what you last heard was that they were looters and rapists. Did you not? So don't they deserve it? That wasn't back in, slavery though, was it? Now we're going to kind of move into operationalizing that to look at what is it, how do we begin to connect that behavior, that history to what we're dealing with and what you're dealing with right now and what we're seeing. And very often people say, well, is everything post-traumatic slave syndrome? Obviously that would, trivialize all the work. We cannot lay squarely on the shoulders of post-traumatic all the problems that we see, nor can we place all the problems squarely on the shoulders of white people or any of the above. So hopefully we won't digress into anything that is that foolish in terms of a discussion. Because, that's another thing that happens in terms of trying to deal with the pushback around this. Then we move into extremes, and it tends to dilute the realities that are going on. So hopefully we're way beyond all that. Well, now she's saying everything is post-traumatic. No, I'm not. And most of my work, my background is really in the field, doing work in the community and grassroots. That's where my training was in terms of my clinical work And just, the fact that I've always been, this work started on the ground. It didn't start here. Matter of fact, I got the attention of places like Oxford and Harvard and, the Ivy League and major institutions, even the FBI, but those were things that happened after I started doing the work on the grassroots level. And so it's, for me, my commitment is to healing. So this is not an exercise in some kind of broad intellectual esoteric. It's really about how do we then take this information and help a person extricate themselves from behavior that they've learned and or been socialized to believe, black and white, and everyone in the middle that's been affected by this. What do we do? So this is kind of looking at
Dan, can we pause for just a
contemporary
second?
kind of reflection of the
Yeah, we can actually finish it up there because there's only a few more minutes and I want us to have plenty of time for closing thoughts. So please go ahead, Gabriel.
Okay, I just wanted to say I really appreciate her. I really do appreciate the hard work that she and Jeanette is also doing in healing people who white folks who are part of this legacy or whatever. I don't. That's less important to me than other work, and I don't actually care about those people very much. I care about some people who are struggling and doing the work. I automatically have, feeling. I feel like Patricia and Jeanette and all the people who have come here. These are people who are traveling to the space of the work. So I'm worried about these people. I care about what happens to them. If they need help and I can help them, I'm going to help them. I understand that there are hardcore racist white people that some people are concerned about trying to bring to a place of reconciliation or reconciliation or,
Trying to take me out.
Was that a bird? Because, we can only see the reaction.
Yes, it was a whole
for you.
big ass, like the crow came for me, y'all.
That's trippy because we could only see it, but it was kind of anyway. I'm saying there's only so many people we have to worry about, and to really get down to brass tacks, and we talk about how the sausage is made. All I'm really worried about is whatever number I need to get reparation bills passed. So if I had a level of precision where I had the exact count down, and you're like the one extra white person after that comes and says I need some help, and you need to help me with my racist problems or whatever, I'm not interested. And it's not because I don't care. I just don't have infinite empathy, and I'm really not. I don't feel like I'm a bad person for not caring as much about the perpetrators, because the people are doing this every single day. So you can say you're doing the work and you're doing whatever else, but unless I have overwhelming evidence that you're actually engaged in keeping this virus under control, that is in your system, that can erupt at any time, unless I have proof that you're doing that, I consider you contagious. And so I'd rather keep you away from me and mine than be like, I'm going to take a chance. So I'm not that. Other people are. I bless them for it. That's not me.
Wow, that was deep. Scorpio, Bantu, either one of y'all want to go next? Because I want to let y'all get in there on that. Then after that, I want Patricia to go, but because Scorpio and Bantu have been very frustrated with the Eurocentric left. So I told him, I was like, you're going to like my white people. So I want one of them to go after Gabriel just so they can have a moment to respond. And then after that, Patricia, I'd like for you to go. I think we'll bounce back. Go ahead,
Well,
Scorpio.
I was say I don't have much to say, but y'all spitting fire right now. Like a lot about what y'all saying about what's going on and what's occurring. You know what I mean? So, I'm just here for the ride. Y'all pretty much hitting the points out.
Okay, go ahead, Patricia.
Trying to click it. I just feel like we get to a tipping point of, and I know there's also discussions amongst the Black American community, and not everybody's quite yet convinced about the route to take. But I think there's a tipping point. We get enough white people that are sort of just unaware, which seems incredible, but get enough, as many people to understand what's really happening, that it could happen. you know. Just need to get enough understanding out there.
Right?
Yeah.
We make it so hard, but it really is simple. All right, Scorpio, you got anything?
I think we can easily accomplish it. I mean, I don't feel this is I mean, when I was younger, I looked at the world, I looked at the problems like, you know, poverty and everything, and I thought it was impossible, but that's because the world taught me, not the world, but that's because the country was trying to make me feel as if this was the only possible society that we can have. But you know, educating myself, knowing more, being more aware, I look at everything and I say, nah, this ain't that difficult. Like if for people to know, like white people that want to know what can I do, it's like all they have one easily. I'll look at white books and be like, educate yourself. But another thing I would say is institutions, and not just institutions. You can find a group that is trying to educate themselves. Like, how would someone know about the issues of another if they don't look into those issues? We got like a lot of books out there that will tell you what exactly one went through. Like, I'll look at a white person and say, I'll look at them and say that you see that person right there that is getting, you know, that, or you see someone back then that was being enslaved, right? And they'd be like, yeah, I'll be like, so picture yourself enslaved. So, you know, are you telling me you wouldn't fight for that person, that person's life not matter? And for them, it's like they think about it in an argumental sense. They think about it in the sense of like a debate or a philosophical sense. And I say, screw that. If somebody were to attack your best friend, your little sister, your mother, your father, what would you do? You fight for them, right? So like, if you were looking at that person, like, and you looked at that black person that was basically being treated like that, are you going to fight for them? And you know, they have to first really start thinking about what is humanity, what constitutes as like value, what constitutes as important. Because, you know, you're telling me that person right there is not important. If you can't fight for that person, that you claim you care about, you only care about that person. So, you know,
you preaching. So I can't be a class reductionist and say I care about Black people. Chairman Nick, I can't be talking about Medicare for all as revolutionary. Wait till I post this video that me and Scorpio were talking about this anarchist thing, because you can't be revolutionary. But let's keep going. Sorry, never mind. I'll be taking jabs and digs, so let me stop. Go ahead.
Because I could see people learning, and that's if for one, people are taught, like, you know, people don't want CRT, but and some white people will try to fight for CRT, but I would look at those white people who fight for CRT, because like this is a pretty complicated situation. I would tell them, have y'all read CRT? And they said no. And I'm like, don't defend something that you don't know. Because if you don't know it, how can you defend it? You better go read into that CRT and find out what CRT be talking about. And then you better understand that if it's being taught in school, you better know who's teaching it. Because, you know, I always understood that, because I understand a lot of people be saying what they are nowadays. And I always think to myself, you know, colleges and certain institutions are owned by the people that are trying to fight against you, or they're being funded by the people that are trying to fight against you, or they have a really bad and racist past, like Duke University, which is you know, which came to form when somebody from North Carolina, Wilmington, I think, basically, or some other place, they took that and transferred it somewhere else, like a white person that basically was a slave owner or descendant of a slave owner. They put it somewhere else, like where Duke University now stands right today. I would say, like, what exactly, because, you know, first is education, but you have to understand who's teaching you, what literature are you reading, because if people really start thinking to themselves, you know, how that white kid basically punched his father or his stepfather for saying the N-word, is like, you have to start thinking, what are you really doing? What are you really fighting for? Like, I think it's easy to get there if people reevaluate the situations, institutions, and systems. And one of the things that I can like tell them is, then you got to create like a group, or, you know, how people get homeschooled, or people have these reading groups. Like, how about you have a reading group with your friends and y'all start reading these books and whatnot? You know, start, you know, maybe you can organize a voice call or video chat, and y'all can start talking about and reading these books and finding out things and looking into what people were saying.
Ooh, I love action steps. Ooh, that's good, Scorpio.
Offer the resources, offer the services. And, you know, over time, start just think about it and question and reevaluate. Like, because, you know, I don't believe this is necessarily difficult because I have to remember the fact that they're teaching kids that slavery was good for us, or you got the news saying this, you got the news saying that. Like, I look at folks like, you have to understand, how are they teaching you to be racist in the first place? Because if you could be taught to be racist, then you could be taught to be something else.
But you have to want it. I want to end there,
Exactly.
actually. I think that was a really good ending, Scorpio. I want to thank everybody for coming. Patricia, I really want to thank, how was it to be on this side of it? You got to unmute yourself. No, because I forget too. I'll remind you.
I've noticed that, not you, but all over the place it happens. What did you ask me?
I asked you, how was it to be on this side of it? Because you're normally a listener. How was it to like participate?
It was fine. I felt a little more nervous at the beginning. You know, I'm not used
Are you
to
comfortable now?
more comfortable. Yes, not totally comfortable.
Practice makes perfect, Patricia. We'll see you next week. You got it in your calendar, right?
See, tell him I'm not scary.
No. I actually
Patricia's
get
scary.
delighted when you get going, and then when you crack up, I love that too.
Man, I can't be serious all the time, but I appreciate you guys. My food just got here. We got 12 minutes till Mud's Bitter Dose starts. So I'm gonna run over there because you know me, I stay monitoring the chat. So I appreciate all of you guys. I think this is gonna be next Friday's episode.
I deny everything but what I have all along admitted. The design on my part to free the slaves.